Hi, everybody. I'm David Wildstein. I'm the editor of the New Jersey Globe. This is one of my favorite days of the year. I know that you chose, but we are we are absolutely. This is just this is our annual filing day 2024 live stream. We're going to talk about politics in New Jersey, about the Senate races, about uh, what's going on with the House races, and the state of politics today. So I am joined with the band back together as always. Micah Rasmussen, the director of the Rebovich Institute of New Jersey Politics at Rider University, and Joey Fox, the New Jersey Globe reporter in Washington, who covers everything about New Jersey. And is one of the smartest people Mike and I know. He just reminds us so much of Steve Kornacki at Politics NJ in 2002, and everybody knows what a compliment that is for me to say. So let's start talking about the Senate race. Just so everybody knows, Joey is going to join us in a few minutes. He's looking at the final filing list, so we are breaking this right as it's happening. But Micah, this has just been an absolutely incredible day and a half in New Jersey politics. It's when just when you think you have seen it all, and yet another thing happens like this. Uh, Tammy Murphy got out of the Senate race. So is it fair for me to say that Andy Kim is the likely Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate and more than likely the next U.S. Senator from New Jersey, maybe for the next 30, 40 years?
I think we can say all of those things, or for as long as he wants. Um, let's face it. I mean, we've got the 52-year record, or the drought of the Republicans in New Jersey on these seats. We have the close to a million voter edge. We've got the even year elections when we've got good turnout. There's just not a foreseeable future in which Republicans all of a sudden get competitive for these seats. So I think we can say all those things, and I think it's a remarkable story. We can almost say, as we were getting ready to start, that we crammed an entire campaign into a month. But you're right. In some ways, we crammed an entire campaign into a day and a half.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me this has a certain parallel to a presidential campaign. New Jersey, until Judge Saheed Qureshi, and then maybe the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and maybe even the U.S. Supreme Court says otherwise. We have lines in New Jersey, and those lines are won in different places for different reasons in different ways. But convention season is sort of like a presidential primary, and they had to go through Monmouth and then Burlington and Hunterdon, and they did an early debate. This campaign started in early February, and it was maybe over by the end of March. I mean, Micah, how did Andy Kim do this?
Oh, it was incredible. He did seem to take each county convention as seriously as a presidential campaign would take a primary, would take a state. And they were on the phone, they were on the ground. They approached it very seriously. They had their ground game going. And for what it's worth, the county committee people took it seriously as well. And there was it was a very methodical, process-oriented thing. I mean, I know Tammy Murphy laments the focus on the process, but the fact is, this was energizing for the party. This was energizing for Democrats throughout the state. In every county, played a role in this process over the last month. So he focused on them. He stroked them. He told them what they needed to hear, and sort of one by one, hand by hand, he built this momentum and this grassroots that just proved to be unstoppable. Was not something that Tammy Murphy ever signed up for, trying to beat that.
And why was Tammy Murphy not acceptable to a lot of Democrats in a lot of parts of the state. I mean, this is a state where you'd think that a progressive woman, who quite frankly had her own valid policy
Hmm.
chops and some good experience as well. Uh, you know, people want to say it's because they just didn't like the optics of a sitting governor handpicking his own wife for a Senate seat. But is that it? Is it just that simple?
I do think that was a serious problem for her from the start, and I also think then that she could not get herself past that. She could not get herself past that initial perception, right? If you want to say Andy Kim succeeded in defining her that way, or she succeeded in defining herself that way, but she really did not succeed in getting past that initial perception. You're right. When we sat down with them, when we had the debate with them, their policy positions were pretty similar. We
Mhm.
had to find very minute differences where we could, how they were going to get to universal health care, different approach, how they were going to do that kind of stuff. But they were really pretty close, other than on this question of the line. They were pretty close on how they were going to get there. And so it really was a question of persona. It was a question of what people knew about her versus the perception that people had of him. And it wound up being these two very different personalities. And I think Democrats around the state decided that they did not want to be dictated to. They wanted to reach their own decision.
I mean, you and I have been around for a very long time. I mean, we have heard uh, bitching and moaning. I'm glad this is a live stream. I can say, bitching and not. I could have said it a lot more, but we've heard bitching and moaning about lines
Yeah.
from people for years. This is not the first time.
No.
All of a sudden, though, it started to stick. And I'm not saying that rank and file primary voters still know what a line is, but it seems to me that activists, that people in general had a better understanding of New Jersey's system, certainly the national media,
Yes.
on how candidates are chosen in New Jersey, more than anybody else. I mean,
Mhm.
how how important was Andy Kim's lawsuit on the lines to his uh, his winning, or being on a path to win the nomination, and maybe forcing Tammy Murphy to get out of the race?
I think it was a masterstroke, and ironically, I think that now he's got to extricate himself from all of this because he's got the lines that he's suing to get on. I'm sure he'll figure that out, but it's a wrinkle that he's got right now. But it was a masterstroke in that he put himself up to, and he won all the non-line counties, or the non machine counties. But he went as far as he could, and then
Except
he
for Bergen, by
knew.
the way. Bergen,
Right. And then
Bergen went.
he knew he was gonna hit that brick wall. He knew that he was gonna run into those 6 counties that just were gonna be almost insurmountable or seemingly insurmountable, and he knew he had to do something about that. He didn't accept that reality. He didn't say, "That's it. I'm stuck now. That I've gone as far as I can go." He took that on too. He figured out, "Okay, well, what's gonna be my strategy for dealing with those?" And you're right. It was a lot of voter education. I don't know how many times you or I have had to explain to the national media how the line works over the last month, but it's been a lot. I can't think of any outlet that hasn't written about it. And it turns out that it couldn't survive the bright light of scrutiny. It was something that, again, even in this day and age, uh, county committee people did not want to be dictated to. They wanted to have their say, and you heard this again and again. You heard it in the machine counties and the non-machine counties too.
I mean, I guess some credit needs to go to Sue Altman. Now, believe it or not, and we're going to talk more about her later, but she is the organization candidate. If you had said to me, a year and a half ago, Sue Altman is going to run the table, clear the field, be on, having won the lines in 6 counties, I don't know that I necessarily would have agreed with that, but I think she laid the groundwork for this. Those PowerPoint presentations
Mhm.
on Saturdays and Sundays all over the state to activists to educate people on what this system of lines were. That to me seemed like a really strong investment by her, by by New Jersey working families.
So,
I go ahead, Joey. You go ahead. I didn't know you were ready to jump in.
well, so I'll quickly say that. So I had been working on on getting up a spreadsheet of all the candidates who have filed this year. If you go to the NewJerseyGlobe.com now, right next to the link to this stream is a link to a story that has my spreadsheet. I did it in a little bit of a rush, so like text me if you see anything that's obviously wrong. But this should be the complete list of congressional and presidential candidates in New Jersey this year. So that's one point I wanted to make. The other point I wanted to make, related to what you guys were talking about, I mean, Micah, you said that, the line, as it turned out, couldn't really survive the bright light of day. And I think that that's true in two different senses. One sense in that, when you have like CNN and New York Times stories talking about the line and the way that some counties just let the county chairperson decide this really massive advantage or whatever, that's just the kind of thing that once voters learn about that, they really start to not like it. I mean, that's just, there's no way to write that in a New York Times profile that makes the county chairperson look really like a stand-up guy. It ends up looking bad. And when the more voters learn about it, the less likely they are to say, yeah, well, whatever, I guess that's just the way it is. So I think that's one way that sort of the bright light of day harms it. And then the other way is just the strongest power of the line comes from a lack of voter education and a willingness of voters to say, well, this is the choices that have been made for me, so I'm perfectly fine with going along with them. So, in a random county commissioner race, if there's an off-the-line candidate, the voter will look at the party slate and then they'll look at Joe Schmo off to the side and be like, I don't know who that is, so I'm just going to go with the people who, the congresswoman that I trust is bracketed with, of course. But when you're looking at a race for U.S. Senate where both candidates are spending millions of dollars and one of them is specifically saying this system is bad and pay attention to it, then that same instinct on the voters' part doesn't exist, because they're not going to go into the ballot, into the voting booth thinking like, I wonder who my party has chosen for me today. They're going to go into the voting booth thinking, I'm going to vote for Tammy Murphy or Andy Kim or Patricia Campos Medina. And so that's just, the more people learn about any individual race, the less power the line has in that race.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, Joey. And in a way, we're all disappointed that we're not going to really get to see that question come to fruition. We
Right.
were all waiting to see, in this well-educated year with a well-educated electorate, with a smaller electorate for the primary, was the line really going to have the same kind of an impact? And was this the perfect storm in which it might not actually matter? We can all speculate. We can all think that we knew what was going to happen, but now we'll never know.
And one of the takeaways, I think, for the last since yesterday afternoon, when Tammy Murphy decided to get out of the race, is you sort of look back, and the last time there was a statewide Democratic primary in which lines were split between two candidates was 2008, when Rob Andrews challenged Frank Lautenberg. That's 16 years ago. And you haven't had a wide open U.S. Senate primary for an open seat since 1982, which is, even further back than that, 42 years. And so once again, rank and file voters don't have the choices. This still, even with all the attention, all the focus, with Andy Kim mounting a spectacular insurgency campaign that caught on among the not necessarily the highest level, not the county chairs and the state legislators and members of the congressional delegation, but at still insiders, county committee and members of their township councils, borough councils, township committees, mayors. They were the ones that had this influence. It didn't really go to the voters still, and it hasn't. And last night, and Joey was on, but there was a press avail that Congressman Kim gave, and I asked him why it was okay for him to get anointed as the line candidate in no process counties like Hudson and Camden, Essex, where just a few months ago he complained that a system was rigged and corrupt, and now he is the beneficiary of a system that hasn't changed, at least not yet. And he didn't he defended himself. He said, "Look, these are the current rules, and if it's not going to be me, then they could go for somebody else." So, I thought that was interesting.
It is. My class actually seemed to get that dynamic, that part of it today, because I'm thinking more, well, what does he have to worry about with Larry Ham or Campos Medina? But my class instantly said today, well, because if now the chairs went from Murphy to him, and if he says no, I don't want your lines, then they can turn around and give them to somebody else. So they saw it as a defensive move.
One
And
thing
they're
that
right.
I'll add to what you were saying, David, and this wasn't your overall point, but just how, this campaign never fully reached the voters, and the people who kind of put the nail in the coffin of the Tammy Murphy campaign were these mid-level Democrats, right? The town council members and the county committee members of the world. Those are the exact same people who won Democrats 5 across 2016 and 2018 House seats in New Jersey. And flipped the House that year. I feel like there's a lot of my point here that I'm making a little bit inelegantly is that there's a lot of overlap between the activists and county committee members and other local Democrats who dramatically increased state Democrats' power in the midterm elections of 2017 for the legislature and 2018 for Congress. And then now I think a lot of party leaders are realizing that particular group of very, very engaged Democrats is a little bit of a double-edged sword, because if they don't go along with the top level choice for whatever office it is, they have a political power that is not really beholden to anybody. And this year was the first year that they really flexed that.
Yeah, and they won. I mean, Andy Kim was not, at least in my mind, in the eyes of progressive activists and and local Democrats who were making their own decisions. He wasn't a compromise choice. They love this guy. They think he's terrific. They are really excited that he could spend 30, 40 years in the U.S. Senate. I should be careful, because I don't know if anybody told Mrs. Kim yet that might be the plan, but he's 41 years old. He'll be the youngest senator from New Jersey since Bill Bradley was 35 when he won. Those that might normally be upset about being, like a candidate being anointed in Hudson County by a really, really tiny group of people, or in Camden County by even a smaller group of people. Maybe group is overstating the definition of that. By maybe picked by one person, but I think they're okay with it because they like the result. That he is exactly the kind of person they want.
But they might not have liked the result if Andy Kim had been the original person who they were like, yes, let's go for him in our back rooms. I think part of the way that Andy Kim can spin this story, even if he ends up being the organizational candidate everywhere, is that he had to fight tooth and nail for every single one of those. Right. And a lot of them really didn't want to do it. So I think that's an important part of the story.
So let me ask a question. We always bemoan these Monday morning quarterbacks that try and say this is how it should have been done, but let's do it. What if Tammy Murphy in June or July had simply said, you know what, I don't like that Bob Menendez is under investigation again. I don't like where he's put the state. Mm-hmm. I've had enough of this, and I'm going to give some serious consideration to taking on Bob Menendez in the primary because I don't like what he's doing to New Jersey. Would that have mattered? Could Tammy Murphy, if she was running against Bob Menendez in the 2-3 months leading into his indictment, if she was already in the race when the Justice Department unsealed its indictment against him, would that have mattered? Would Tammy have suddenly become the darling of those same people that didn't like her?
My gut reaction is that she would have wound up in the same place, that they would have defined her in the same way. However, the tantalizing thing about what you just laid out is if she's really leading the charge against him, if she's really distinguishing herself by being the reformer, and saying you really, haranguing him, trying to get him out of the race, that maybe succeeds in defining her a little bit differently than just as the governor's wife. But it's hard to imagine that she can get out from under that under any circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would have always been a line that anybody could use against her. But I think that if she had been really out front on that, that would have nullified it to some extent. And I think that in retrospect, I think that she made a strategic error by doing what New Jersey politicians who are in positions of strength always do, which is they say, look at this county chair who's endorsing me. Look at this congressman who's endorsing me. That's like the classic thing that you do in New Jersey. That's the classic thing you do in almost all politics. But in New Jersey, you really, really do that. And like if someone launches a campaign and they don't immediately have endorsements like that, the typical response in New Jersey is like, well, then they're probably not that strong of a candidate. They're probably not going to be the choice. So I don't think that anybody at the time would have reasonably said that she shouldn't have done that. So this is very much Monday morning quarterbacking. But with the benefit of hindsight, I think that was a clear strategic error to come out of the gate being like, yes, all of these lovely county chairs who don't hold any elected office and in fact hold offices appointed by my husband are backing me. Like that with what we know now about how this campaign went down, I would go back in time and advise our campaign, keep these endorsements way, way on the down low. Don't publicize them at all. You can let those people push for your campaign behind the scenes, but just run on your own stuff, at least to start out with, before making it look like you are the anointed one. And I think that was just, once those early endorsements came down, those endorsements that usually signal strength, that set the narrative on a course that was really hard to turn back from and really hard for her to later say, well, I'm running for New Jersey Senate because I believe in working families or whatever, because that wasn't really the tone that things started out with.
And David, you've talked a lot about her policy chops. We've seen Steve Fulop come out of the gate already for his governor's race with a series of white papers, a series of ideas. He's letting people know that this is a very different kind of campaign than what we've seen before. And so, maybe something like that could have worked and showed that she had ideas and proposals and thoughts and serious agenda to go down to Washington with. I don't know if it would have helped or not, but anything would have been better than falling into that same rut.
And in my opinion, she's actually an extremely qualified candidate, not in a traditional sense. And I think maybe you can make the argument if you're directly comparing, Obama administration alum, 3-term Congressman Andy Kim to Tammy Murphy. I'm not sure you could make the case that she is more qualified than him. But I think in just a basic sense, there's lots of random business people and stuff that run for the Senate all the time. There's like several of the Republicans' top recruits for random Senate seats around the country this year are just like local businessmen who got rich and is now running for Senate. Like I don't think there's anything about Tammy Murphy's profile that would indicate that she would be a bad senator or an unqualified senator. But I think that ended up being an easy, if inaccurate, line of attack against her because of all these factors that we've already talked about.
Yeah, we talked a lot. David, I'll let you take it, but we talked a lot about how Bill Bradley came from outside of politics and Frank Lautenberg came from outside of politics, and they were able to satisfy those concerns. Now, you might say, well, they were white men, but they were able to answer those questions that they needed to answer that she apparently couldn't answer.
Yeah. And one of the things I think history will show about the 2024 U.S. Senate race in New Jersey is Andy Kim gets a lot of credit for seizing the moment. He was the very first major Democrat after Menendez was indicted to say he should resign. Before he did it before there was a meeting in Newark of the governor and legislative leaders and major county chairs where they all decided we're gonna sign on and also tell him to go. He did it first. He did it quickly, and then the next day he got in the Senate race. And politics, and we all know this. Sometimes it's entirely about good timing, and it's entirely and it's also very much influenced by good judgment. Andy Kim, I mean, you look at this career of him running against Tom MacArthur in a district that Donald Trump won. in 2016. Uh, uh, he had never worked on a campaign before. He didn't know the party leaders, and he, against a millionaire congressman who had self-funded his way into the House. I mean, he won narrowly. 2 years later, against another self-funder, he won. Even as Trump was carrying his district, which included a lot of Ocean County, he won. 2 years after that, and against another self-funder in a better district, but he did great. So, you know, I don't think it's fair as we talk about Kim, seizing on this issue of the lines, but this guy seems to me like he is a skilled. He has become a skilled political operator. He knows his way around politics, and I think he's just got. I think what he's showing objectively is he's got good instincts.
Yeah.
And he's willing to follow his instincts, and his team is willing to follow those instincts too. I mean, he can't have had that many meetings or talked with that many consultants about calling for Menendez to resign or then launching the campaign the next day. There wasn't enough time. That had to be just a decision that he made, and everybody said, okay, now let's actually make it happen. And I think that when you compare that to a lot of other campaigns, you get, because there's a lot of people working on it, and because there's a lot of different personalities, and because the candidate maybe doesn't put their foot down enough and say, okay, this is what we're doing, you get these kind of mixed messages. You get, you talk to one spokesperson, you get one response, you get talk to another spokesperson, you get another response, or, you don't get a response for 18 hours because they're trying to hash it out or whatever it may be. Whereas I think that a key advantage of the Kim campaign from day one is that Andy Kim seems to know what he's doing most of the time, and the people around him seem to trust him to know what he's doing, and they go do it. And that's just, that kind of lean, mean operation is going to be really effective as long as the core of it, like the actual things that they're doing, are the right things.
There's a couple of things that occur to me there. One, Bill Smith tweeted out, the old adage that luck favors the brave, and it certainly did this time. And another thing, David, that you and I talked about at one point in all of this is going back to that very first time when Andy Kim is a very first time candidate, and he gets lost in the parking lot, and the trackers follow him around, and he doesn't know what to do, and he doesn't know which way to go. You could almost see in retrospect the wheels turning. This is not going to define me. I am going to get good at this. I am going to figure it out. I'm going to get some instincts and some chops. And I think people can see that it's him. People can see that he's driving the train, and people can see that his staff is following him. It's not the other way around. He's making these decisions. I think there's a respect for that in this day and age of politics.
So let's talk about Republicans. I mean, Joey, seemed like last week there were 10 in the field. You have this list. Tell us about this. Who's actually filed? Who's in this now?
Well, so before we move on to Republicans, I'll quickly say that about on the Democratic side, just in terms of who will literally be on the ballot. So we ended up having 3 candidates on the ballot for Democrats. It's kind of the 3 that you would have expected without Tammy Murphy. It's Andy Kim, Larry Ham, Patricia Kempes Medina. Patrick Merrill, who we mentioned a couple times, who had filed with the FEC, does not appear to have filed. There's no other last minute anythings. So this is going to be what it is on the Democratic side. And, that'll be, I think this campaign on the Democratic side will still be interesting to watch, if not for, questions about the ultimate result. I think you're going to see Andy Kim win, but questions for how does this play out? I mean, now that there is no longer the threat of Tammy Murphy, do progressives start getting more comfortable with supporting Patricia Kempes Medina or Larry Ham, who are, more explicitly progressive and who are more directly saying the types of things that like the left wing of the Democratic Party wants to hear on Gaza, on healthcare, et cetera? Do you start to see some kind of bleed over to that side? How effective is their campaign able to be in terms of staying relevant, even as the main battle of this campaign between Kim and Murphy is no longer there? So I'll just sort of lay a stake down now to say that, the Globe intends to continue covering this primary on the Democratic side. And I'll be really curious to see how the Kim campaign adjusts to frontrunner status and how his 2 remaining opponents are able to capitalize on that.
And let me just interrupt quickly. April 15th, we'll see how much Patricia Kempes Medina raised.
Yes.
And we'll see if this is really a campaign or is this just an activist who has created a little bit of a platform on social media? And there's a big difference there.
Yeah. And so then, oh, sorry, Micah, go ahead.
No.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I thought you said something. On the Republican side, you had Alex Zidane and Fred Schneiderman drop out this morning. Alex Zidane had won 2 county lines, and Schneiderman had not won any, but had been kind of competitive in Bergen. So that's just that's really winnowed the field down to 2 people mainly to pay attention to. It's Curtis Bashaw, who's a developer from Cape May, and then Christine Serrano-Glassner, who is the mayor of Mendham Borough in Morris County. You have 3 other people on the ballot. You've got Justin Murphy, who this is before my time, so I actually forget what office he ran for before.
Congress in the 3rd district.
Yes, right. Was that in 2014?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. He competed. He was a former Tabernacle committeeman, like a pretty small town in Burlington County. He competed at a few county conventions, got like a couple of votes at each of them. He is by default the 3rd most serious Republican candidate, but I can't imagine him making too much of an impact. Then you've got Albert Harshaw and Peter Valerosi. I mean, there are a few names every year who pop up on ballots who people are like, oh, that's a name, and then they'll go vote for someone else. I think those are 2 of them, unless something crazy happens. So it's really Curtis Bashaw and Christine Serrano-Glassner. And if you look at the county lines, there are a couple of shifts today, so I don't know exactly the numbers in my head, but it's something like Bashaw has the line, if it's
about 61%. Yeah.
In what?
About 61% of the. He's
Okay.
got the lines in the counties where about 61% of
then
Republican voters live.
Serrano-Glassner is something like 34%, right? And then there's a couple of counties with no lines at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something like the math. Regardless, Bashaw has a definite advantage, but it's not a completely overwhelming one. And I think that the place where you might see this get a little interesting is because Bashaw is not a super pro-Trump guy, and Serrano-Glassner is definitely a pro-Trump candidate. And so the one way I think you can see this get interesting is if Serrano-Glassner really racks up the score in her own areas, in the places where she has the county line, which is mostly like North Jersey, especially Northwest Jersey. And Bashaw struggles to really capitalize on his areas because Republicans are hesitant to vote for a candidate who himself is hesitant to vote for Trump. So yeah, I mean, this will be another primary that's going to be very much worth watching. It is likely going to be the primary for the right to lose to Andy Kim. That is sort of ultimately the way that you have to see it. As I'm sure that the campaigns for the 2 candidates will not be super happy with me saying that, but that is kind of what this is. This is a campaign to get into the general election and do as best you can, and probably end up losing to the Democrat. But that doesn't mean it's not worth watching.
But unless, and there's this big asterisk on this race, and that is, what if Bob Menendez is found not guilty, and what if he continues with what he said last week, which is that he would seek re-election as a vindicated man, as an independent Democrat. I think he's got to win 8% of the vote, something like that, about 8% of the vote, to suddenly put this seat in play. Until we know what the jury does with Menendez, maybe clearly New Jersey is if it does what it's supposed to do, it's going to elect a Democrat to the U.S. Senate. But maybe there's this little catch here. Maybe Menendez could really make a stink and scare Democrats into thinking that New Jersey Senate seat, pivotal Senate seat, could be in play.
He did that once before in 2018 in a different way. And now, I mean, my instinct is that ultimately, first of all, my instinct is that I find it unlikely that he would deliver such a compelling legal case that he is utterly and completely exonerated by, within a couple months of the trial starting. I'm not an expert on the legal, minutia of this case, but my broad read is that seems like that's a pretty narrow possibility. And also, even if he is completely exonerated, my instinct is that his name has been pretty well sullied in the minds of nearly all voters. And voters don't really like to opt for independent candidates regardless, let alone independent candidates who they've heard months and months about how they're a terrible person and they were corrupt in this way and corrupt in that way. I think that the asterisk is very much warranted. It's very much worth keeping in mind. What if Bob Menendez runs again? What if he gets 10% of the vote? What if everything goes wrong for Democrats? But to me, there's enough ifs in that. And there's enough sort of if this, then this, then this, then this. That it's still a pretty remote possibility.
So go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
No, it is fascinating. It's tantalizing to think about, but it is hard even to imagine that he's so motivated to do that. That he would be so. I mean, unless he's just on a complete kamikaze mission, it's fun to think about. But I mean, do any of us think that that's what's going to motivate him to wake up every morning for the 6 months before the election and do that every day? I'm not sure. I also think, there's the legal exoneration, which is a tall enough order. And then there's the exoneration of you still took the gold bars from somebody for, not doing the public's work for, self-enrichment. So I don't think that he's going to quite get the name clearing that he is hoping for.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to think you're right. But the
There's
other
also a question of how much of his campaign money he'll burn through in the next couple of months dealing with his legal stuff. So that, he's got an intimidating war chest right now, but will it be more than $1 million or $2 million by July? I don't know.
So we're talking about money also as it relates to the Republicans, which is, we're looking at lines, but the possibility exists that there won't be lines in the June 4th primary. And now you have, I think Andy Kim has the money. He's got the resources. If he wins his own lawsuit, he's going to be just fine. He's going to be fine either way.
Yeah.
But what about the Republican primary? What if all of a sudden the lines are gone, and now you've got 5 candidates and nobody? We saw the poll that Patrick Murray did on Name ID. Nobody knows any of them. And we haven't seen Bashaw's first FEC report. We know that Serrano Glasner didn't do well fundraising in the fourth quarter of 23. We don't know how she's going to do, but what does this make the primary if they all lose the lines? If we went through convention season for nothing, is this Republican primary still wide open? And is there one of the other 3 that just could just surprise everybody and come in because primary voters don't know who they're voting for?
I mean, I think at that point, Serrano Glasner's got to fall back on what she's got, which is her connection to Trump, which is not going to help her general election wise, obviously, but she's got to fall back on that, at least for the primary, and hope that, Trump voters are going to turn out and vote. Bashaw's got to rely on the money that he's willing to put into the race. Those are the things that step up when the line recedes, right? When you don't know that about whether or not the organization is supporting them, what else do you know about them? You know what Bashaw can pay to communicate out about his election, and maybe about her connections to Trump world.
And you have Justin Murphy, former deputy mayor of Tabernacle. Can a man named Murphy win a Republican primary? Even if the lines were gone, could a man named Murphy win a Republican primary? It was the last couple of years you had a Democrat on the progressive side named DeSantis, and he said after the campaign that was not a great name to run with in a Democratic primary. Is Justin Murphy in a Republican primary? Will people going to say, no, I'm not voting for Murphy, and that's it?
It's possible. I mean, I think that would be a more salient question if I felt like he would be a front-running candidate if not for that. I don't know how we're going to measure the effect of someone who might get 8% of the vote versus what if he would have gotten 9 had he had a different last name. So one thing, because you asked this question about whether, what if there's no lines? What if one of these 3 other candidates who's not Bashaw or Serrano Glasner somehow wins? I mean, I feel like I've seen New Jersey political people talk about this, and people who are heavily involved in New Jersey politics don't necessarily have the perspective on what happens in other states that don't have lines, usually completely random people who have not raised any money or made any particular dent in their campaigns don't win primaries. It does happen, but usually it doesn't. Like that's not a common occurrence. And it's really odd when it does happen, and there's usually some specific factor behind it. And so this idea that if the line were to go away, then suddenly who knows who's going to win? Like everything is purely up in the air. Well, not really. It's probably still going to go to the candidate who has the most endorsements and the most money and run the best campaign, because that's how politics usually works. You're missing the only thing that the death of the line does is it means that you get rid of the thing that most clearly indicates who has all of those advantages to voters. But most voters are still going to figure it out anyways. They're still going to see like a Curtis Bashaw TV ad or get a mailer or something and say, oh, this is the guy I want to support. And then they'll go support him. And they're not going to receive that from Albert Harshaw. And so they're not going to support him. So I think that if the line goes away in New Jersey, that'll obviously be a momentous occasion and lots of things about politics will change. But you're probably not going to see that many people who just win primaries completely at random because they were there.
The organization name may still be attached to the endorsed candidate, even, right? It's slogan,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. Would be, yeah. All right. So why don't we do this? Joey, if you take it over now, and let's talk about the congressional filings.
Well, let's actually quickly, if you don't mind, talk about the presidential filings, because I actually think this is kind of interesting. So there are a total of only 3 candidates. I'm going to refresh the page to make sure that they haven't added anything else. Yeah, 3 candidates have filed for president across both parties. So you have Joe Biden, you have Donald Trump, and then you have one extra Democrat, this woman named Teresa Bukovinak, something like that, who is an anti-abortion activist. So really what you're looking at is, so in other states, people have looked at the Republican primary to see, even with Nikki Haley dropped out, they'll look at the Nikki Haley vote share to see, how strong is this anti-Trump contingent? What kind of discontent are we seeing in Trump from like suburban Republicans? In Democratic primaries, we've looked at, our Muslim voters, our young voters, our progressive voters, defecting from Biden by voting uncommitted or voting for Marianne Williamson. We're not going to really have either of those options in New Jersey. I feel like people are going to struggle to interpret the presidential primary in any particular way, because Trump will be literally uncontested. So I guess you could look at write-ins. And then Biden will be going up against anybody who votes for anti-abortion activist Teresa Bukovinak is not too much of a Democrat and probably would not vote for a Democrat in a general election anyways. So I think that is just, probably not worth commenting on all that much more than that, especially on the Republican side, since as things currently stand, New Jersey is set to get screwed by the RNC in terms of how many delegates it actually gets, because the New Jersey primary day is a few days too late for the RNC's cutoff. But just thought I'd quickly point that out. Those are technically the 3 people we will have on the ballot for president.
So I don't actually need to learn how to pronounce her name. I'm good.
I mean, yeah, maybe I will at some point so that I don't stumble over it every single time.
She's not a New Jersey person.
She's from Virginia.
Right. She was head of what was called the Democrats for Life of America. She's raised $28,000 for a presidential campaign so far.
Yeah.
I think she's got a real chance. I think that could be our next president.
Now I think we should move on to the congressional.
Yes, now to Congress.
Unless we want 4 hours tonight.
Yeah.
So if you guys don't mind, I think we should just move south to north, 1 through 12, because I actually think that a lot of the most interesting races are concentrated towards the beginning.
Okay.
And then the ones that aren't that interesting, we can fly through. I think that there is a contested primary. Oh no, there's one district where there is no contested primary on either side. But every other district, that's the 10th district, but every other district has at least 2 candidates in at least one of the parties. So starting off with District 1, and again, for people who missed this before, all of this, it's published on the Division of Elections website, but more conveniently, it is published on the New Jersey Globe website, where you can click on here's who's filed for president in Congress and see my handy spreadsheet. So if you're looking at District 1, you've got Donald Norcross, and the very first thing that I noticed with this is he had a declared primary challenger who is not here. This is Tiff D'Amico, who had an odd job related to like post-birth something. She struck me as an interesting candidate all around, but now she's apparently not a candidate, period. She had been specifically announced as the challenger to Norcross. She's not on this list of candidates. I don't know whether she dropped out or whether she didn't get her petitions in time or what happened.
So the Division of Elections told me around 7:30 tonight that this list is complete.
Okay, so then I
that
guess
if they're not on the list, she didn't file. So Donald Norcross avoids a primary. I'll tell you,
Republicans somehow did not avoid a primary, even in a safely Democratic district. They have 4 candidates, which is super strange.
Yeah,
it is. And look, this is. I mean, Joey, you have a lot of years left in you in politics, but I don't have enough. I don't have enough time left, for me to give a complete and total list of my grievances. But one of them, and you guys know this, is it happens every filing day. These people that announce, they say, I am a candidate for this office, and they file, with the FEC or ELEC, and they say I'm running for this office, and they go and they want attention, and they want their press releases covered, and they want people to talk to them, and they show up at these county conventions, and by filing day they just don't do anything, and you don't ever see their signatures. And I don't know if they're real candidates. So we the New Jersey Globe and Joey and I have done this as carefully as we can. We give people announcement stories, and we'll cover their dropping out of the race, but they've got to show something. They've got to show some flicker of life in order to be more than just saying they're a candidate. But I'll tell you, with Tiffany D'Amico, I'm a little disappointed, because this would have been one hell of an entertaining primary. I say this, I'm not passing any judgment. It's none of my business. I don't have it. It's not for me to say whether this is a good idea or a bad idea. But what we saw last year in Chris Del Borello's Senate race is sometimes what you do for a living can get painted in a way that makes you not at all competitive. And what Tiffany D'Amico does for a living is she markets placentas in a belief that if women eat their own placentas, it makes them and their baby healthier. And again, not passing any judgment other than to say, could you imagine what these ads would have looked like if George Norcross and Mickey Quinn and Steve Askew were suddenly characterizing her, as Hannibal Lecter, and this became a sort of a Silence of the Lambs campaign about eating body parts. I think we all got deprived of this, but the real thing here is going into 25, going into a big governor's race, and I'll say this up front so I don't have to keep saying it in every district. But as you start looking at 25, especially if there's not lines left anymore, these long lists of people that aren't really candidates beyond in their own minds will confuse a ballot if New Jersey goes to office block voting. Then you have this long list of people, and you have serious candidates sort of sandwiched in between people that don't belong on the ballot. So I'm just putting this out there. I think one of the things that might come with no lines, we'll see, is what Joey thinks about some of these primaries about nothing. But are they, are we going to have to look? Will the legislature have to look at changing the number of signatures and maybe making it a little tougher to get on the ballot if everybody's, evenly placed in an office block vote?
New Jersey definitely has an unusually low. I mean, you only need 200 signatures to get on the ballot for Congress, which, I mean, that just, if you can't manage that, then there's no way that you can manage the basics of really doing a congressional campaign. I mean, that's just sort of, that feels like a basic level of competence that, and I mean, I think I've said something exactly this effect on previous live streams. I'm, from New York City, and that was sort of where I got my political start. and the signature requirements there for various offices are way higher. And there's a huge culture of challenging petitions, such that to run for state senate, you realistically want to get like 8,000 signatures. Whereas New Jersey, you can get 225 for Congress, and it's like, you're probably fine. And I don't want to particularly pass judgment on whether that's good or bad, in the sense that, like, I think that there are definite advantages to having it be a low threshold system that allows people who don't have a lot of resources at their disposal and a lot of political wherewithal to try their hand at democracy. But it also does leave you with people who can just sort of, if they feel like running for office, it's like, okay, I'll do it. 200 signatures, I can manage that. And so, I mean, go ahead, Micah.
No, I was just going to say, to this end that we're talking about, the low threshold, one of the things that South Jersey progressives seem particularly happy about is that there are no phantom candidates who have filed this year. So they think that despite our low threshold, they have dodged that bullet.
Yes.
Believe.
Although we don't know yet whether, because we're looking at candidates for Congress and president right now. It'll take us a little bit more teeth pulling to learn about all the candidates for county level races and town level races every year. That's a whole project to try to get that out of the different the 21 county clerks. That's not tracked statewide. That's tracked on a county level. So we'll see what drama is lurking on those races.
So Joey, let's go back to the first. You have four Republicans.
Yeah, so you've got 4 Republicans. You've got Teddy Liddell, who is going to strain my memory in terms of what each of these people do. He's a veteran and now a lawyer. Claire Gustafson, who is a frequent candidate for this district. She's run several times before. She was the nominee in both 2020 and 2022. You've got Damon Galdo, who's a carpenter who ran 2 years ago as well. He lost the primary to Gustafson. You've got Nick Whitelock, who is a newcomer. He's like a real estate investor or something along those lines. And Liddell has the line in Camden and Burlington, which are a majority but not an overwhelming majority of the district. And Gustafson has the line in Gloucester. I mean, it's an interesting primary. It's a primary that I would find more interesting if the winner was likely to serve in Congress. But the winner is likely to lose to Donald Norcross by something in the neighborhood of 15 to 25 percentage points. So, it's it's interesting that there are these 4 candidates who are filing. I think that you could see some odd dynamics play out, especially if the line is overturned and the advantages that Liddell and Gustafson have built up go away. But it is ultimately for the right to very likely lose to a congressman who sits in a Camden district that hasn't elected a Republican, I don't know how many years, but a lot of them.
Yeah. 72.
That.
Yeah. Long time ago.
Yeah. And then I think if you guys are already really ready to move on, I think you're seeing something of the reverse, although not to quite the same extent, in the other main South Jersey district, the 2nd district. So this is Jeff Van Drew. A few years on from party switching, he is clearly very much in command of his party and his electorate there. He has no primary challengers. He's running Donald Trump's campaign. If Donald Trump wins, he will be the most powerful Republican in New Jersey. And he is going to sail this year unless Democrats can put up a real campaign against him, which I think that's sort of a question mark, but leaning maybe no, given how well he's done recently. You've got 4 Democrats who are running. You got Tim Alexander, who is the nominee last time. This is going to be a frequent theme. There's a lot of repeat candidates this year. He lost to Van Drew by 19 percentage points, but he has most of the county lines again this year. You've got Joe Salerno, who's a self-funder. He put $400,000 of his own money into the campaign, which makes him way better funded than any of the other Democratic candidates. You've got Carolyn Rush, who is, in my opinion, mostly interesting for being a co-plaintiff in Andy Kim's anti-line lawsuit. And she and one other candidate who we'll get to soon is arguably suddenly more important than Andy Kim in that lawsuit, because the harm against Andy Kim has disappeared now that he's on the line everywhere. But the harm against Carolyn Rush, who is off the line in Atlantic County and Ocean County and wherever else, that harm has not disappeared for her. And then you've got Rodney Dean Sr. No idea who that is. Never heard his name before. His name popped up in the filing. I have not had time to look him up or learn what he is, but he is also there. So Micah, you're obviously originally a South Jersey guy. what do you think about this primary, and do you think that it will ultimately matter in terms of the general election result?
It's interesting that none of them are throwaway candidates. I mean, I hope I mean that respectfully. They all are serious in their own right. They're all eager to take him on. This is residual anger by, I think, Democrats toward what Van Drew did, the flip, in 2020, and or 20. What, I have that wrong. 2018, 2019.
It's 2019 that he flipped.
2019, exactly. But I think it's all residual. I think Democrats are always going to be mad at him in this part of the state. You're always going to have a Democrat stepping up, and so ultimately, yeah, it's hard to see this as anything other than stepping up to be defeated by him. There'd have to be so much lightning that would have to strike in order to make them competitive in this race. It's not there right now. I mean, maybe one of the best indications is just the relative disorder that a lot of these county Democratic organizations are in this district. A lot has to happen to get them back in fighting form, I think.
Yeah, and this is a part of the state that is
district, right? I mean, Trump will probably carry this district.
And if there's anywhere that Trump improves versus 2020 showing, I would not be surprised if it's here. I mean, this is just a part of the state. Cumberland County is not looking super friendly to Democrats right now. It's voted for Democrats in the presidential races for several decades, I think. I would not be remotely surprised. I don't think it's a certainty, but I would not be remotely surprised if 2024 is the year that it flips to Republican.
That's a great point. If you can't win Cumberland, then you're in big trouble. Yeah.
And Cumberland is a disaster.
Yeah, Democrats are in a total mess right there right now. There's no consensus about who the party endorsed candidates are, who the party chairperson is, who anybody is anywhere.
So Carolyn Rush filed with 220 signatures. And you need 200 to get on the ballot. If 21 of them are invalidated, she's out of the race. And the only reason I think that matters is she can't be a plaintiff in a lawsuit if she's not a candidate for office.
Right.
Other than that, is there anything else you should care about?
So you're saying somebody should be pulling that petition, or has already pulled that petition?
I'm sure they will. And look,
just to clarify, I mean, for viewers, this is not something that happens automatically. People have surely made the ballot in the past without actually having the sufficient number of ballot signatures, because it has to be proactively challenged. Just the same way that in order to get a recount in New Jersey, it doesn't just happen. It has to be proactively asked for and sued for. So the big question over the next couple of days, I mean, it's actually not that big of a question, but because none of the candidates who have a very strong chance of winning are really teetering on the edge of signature viability. But we'll see over the next few days whose petitions are challenged, who bothers to step up and try this, and who just looks at the 220 of a random candidate and says, why bother? I'm just not going to, whatever. She can run if she wants. Who cares?
Which she might otherwise be in, except for the situation Dave just described, where maybe somebody's got an interest in knocking her off the ballot.
Yeah, and I'll point out, and again, this is the kind of thing I just say once, and then it carries for all these districts. New Jersey, because of course, nothing in New Jersey has to make sense. If you file in Trenton, so that is for U.S. Senate, Congress, Governor, State Senate, State Assembly, delegate to the National Convention, a challenge to these petitions is filed by the most efficient judicial system in New Jersey as it relates to election matters, and that is the matter will come before an administrative law judge, and they will hear the case, the challenge, normally within a day. They will go on, they will check the petitions one signature at a time, and the judge will, in most cases, make a decision, make a determination right there on the spot. If you're running for township committee in a tiny little town and you want to challenge your petition's being challenged, you've got to go to Superior Court. You've got to pay a filing fee. You've got to wait to get on their docket. You've got to hope that you get one of the Superior Court judges that understands election law, as opposed to one of the Superior Court judges who think they don't understand it and they don't know anything about it and they get it wrong. And then you got to, if you got to cross your fingers that if it goes to the appellate division, they won't bump a primary challenge until sometime in August, when it doesn't matter either. So these challenges, these are going to get heard quickly. And the challenge doesn't have to come from a candidate. It can come from any voter. So I think you'll have some of these, and there's not a whole lot this year that are challengeable, but Carolyn Rush at 220, I can see that. And Justin Murphy for U.S. Senate, he was at 1,053. So he's 53 signatures over. And somebody may decide that they don't want to risk, one more candidate. Maybe it's Bashaw says, I don't want another South Jersey candidate. Maybe it's Serrano saying, I don't want another conservative candidate in the race. But I think what will happen is and this is the way it works, is they'll pull the petitions and they'll see if they think they can make a challenge. And if they think there's enough signatures that they can get somebody off the ballot because they don't live in the right district, or they're not registered voters, or the signature's illegible, then they can make this case.
So since we're talking about people who are on the cusp, I feel like we should also quickly give a shout out to people who are the farthest away from getting disqualified. So congratulations to Andy Kim for submitting 6,345 signatures.
Right.
Congratulations to Larry Ham for submitting 4,948.
That's wild.
And congratulations.
He may have more signatures than he winds up with votes in the primary.
Larry Ham. I think Larry Ham's going to beat 4,000 votes. And Mikey Sherrill, who has a lower threshold, who's filed 3,706. If I remember correctly, Donald Payne Jr. in 2022, when he was facing a challenge from Imani Oakley and really wanted to prove, because he had a reputation as a bit of a lackluster campaigner, and his campaign really wanted to prove, like, no, we're taking this seriously. We're doing the work. I believe at a 200 signature requirement, he filed 10,000. I'm struggling to find the confirmation of that, but I think that was true.
It sounds familiar.
I remember sitting that day in the filing office as his poor campaign staff just came in with they had already filed a bunch and they were still coming in with their reams and reams. And the Division of Elections, I mean, they have to go through each and every one of these like as if they are the necessary ones. They can't just say after 5,000, it's probably good. They have to do their due diligence. So Donald Payne's staff tied up about probably a quarter of the total man hours of the 2022 filing period.
So Donald Payne took that last campaign very seriously.
Yep.
And it has paid off. We can skip ahead very quickly to him. It has paid off in the fact that he has no primary challenger and he's in the safest Democratic district in New Jersey. So he has been functionally reelected.
So here's what happened. Donald Payne asked his county chairman, Leroy Jones, how many signatures do I need to get? And Chairman Jones says, I don't know, you should go get 10,000. So that's what he did. He did 10,000. And I will say this about petitions also. I was among those who sort of scoffed at these people who come in with exponentially more than they need and putting that work in, until I heard Brian Stack put me in my place.
Of course he did.
You know what? He said, the reason you go get so many signatures in March and in the winter is because there's not a whole lot for your campaign organization to do. And so you test your organization and you give people quotas and you say, I need you to get 50 signatures. I need you to get 75 signatures. And then you have a metric by which to judge whether somebody is coming through for you or not. And if people aren't delivering signatures on petitions, then Brian Stack says maybe they won't deliver you votes on election day. And I have changed my mind on this. I think these petitions sometimes is a good test of early organizational strength.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the one situation none of these incumbents ever want to find themselves in is being caught off guard, being caught by surprise, and this is, one of many many ways they need to show that they're not caught by surprise, that they do have the organizational strength, and they've got that support out in the community ready to mobilize when they need it. So.
Right.
Yeah, I would say there was a time when you might have caught him off guard, but at this point he is prepared.
Now I'm curious how many total votes Payne got in the 2022 primary, and what percentage the ratio of votes to petition signatures that year. Okay,
I think we said he did really well.
He got 30,000 votes in that year's primary, so about he got 1/3 as many signatures as he did votes. Anyways,
One other thing about signature numbers. I know we're beating this dead horse. I apologize for that reference, but Menendez and Bala came within 23 signatures of each other. They both filed 1,200 and change, which is pretty wild.
that is interesting.
Yeah.
Should we move on to District 3?
Yes.
So this is Andy Kim's open seat. And I'll be honest, the Globe has done our best to cover it pretty faithfully. It's gotten write-ups in a couple of other news outlets. This is a race that, despite being an open seat and a seat that was once really competitive, I feel like has completely slipped off of everyone's radars. There are 8 candidates running, and I think that all of them, at least for now, have tremendously low name recognition among both their potential future constituents and just sort of in the general political chattering class. Like, I think if you asked your average Politico, DC, or roll call or whatever journalist about the candidates running for the 3rd congressional district, most of them would say, I don't know, I haven't looked at that one yet. David, I mean, why do you think that the primary has kind of taken this shape, and does it matter?
Well, I thought initially when Andy Kim, and literally the day Andy Kim got in the Senate race, Joey and I were already on this open seat race.
I was writing it from the lobby of an AMC movie theater where I had gone to see a movie with a friend, and then literally the minute that the movie started, I got a call from David. I checked my phone and I saw Andy Kim will run for U.S. Senate, and I said, "Oh my God, okay, I'm not going to watch this movie. I'm going to go do work in this AMC lobby. This usher is going to keep on trying to chat me up. I'm going to no, I'm really trying to do work right now."
But this was, what you have here, even though national people may not have be focusing on this race, on the Democratic side, you got 2 people who are proven vote getters. Herb Conaway has been in the state assembly since 1997. He is I think the 2nd most senior candidate there. Carol Murphy is the majority whip of the state assembly. She's in her 4th term. They both come out of Burlington County. I thought, we'll talk about it when we get to District 7. I mean, so much of this landscape has changed since the end of last year. We thought the District 7 primary was going to be the one to watch. I thought this was going to be quite a race in District 3. Conaway won conventions in Burlington, first Monmouth, then Burlington, then Mercer. He's got,
and none of them were remotely close. They were 3 landslides in a row. He is
there had been some talk about the Burlington line being shared by Conaway and Carol Murphy, and that didn't happen. Conaway is the clear favorite unless Judge Karashi tosses the lines, and there's no stay of the ruling, and all of a sudden you've got 2 sitting legislators from Burlington County, and they're basically starting the campaign from scratch very early, very late. And
with 2 other legitimate candidates in the race too. You've got the civil rights attorney Joe Cohn, and then you've got Sarah Schoengood, who is a businesswoman and also is the other Kim co-plaintiff, who is saying that the county line has irreparably harmed her. You've also got a 5th candidate, Brian Schieper, which is a great last name. He is one of the people who just sort of appears on the filing petitions. I'm like, oh, okay, he's also there. I'm not sure what his deal is, but
I'll tell you his deal. Parent, Teacher, new voice.
Yes, he has a parent and a teacher and a new voice. So that's really big. Those are the three things that people want in their congressman. But yeah, I mean, so like, you know, we saw the first quarter, or I guess it was technically the fourth quarter, but it was their first quarter in the race fundraising reports for Carol Murphy and Herb Conaway, and they were nothing that would scare anyone off. Well, so they did this quarter, but they each raised like $40,000, which is, you know,
So here's the thing
medium for a legislative campaign, not even for a congressional campaign.
I think
I think the line lawsuit, it applies if it impacts anywhere, it really, really impacts here.
Sure. So I think what's happening right now is Carol Murphy is waiting to see what the judge decides.
That's right.
Yeah.
And if the line continues, she's got till April 4th to make a final decision. I don't think she's going to stay in the race if Herb Conaway's got 3 lines with Andy Kim running with him on all 3. But if the lines are abolished, it's a brand new race. Maybe for all 4 of them. We don't know what the fundraising quarter is going to be, but
this fundraising quarter is going to be really, really fascinating to track in this race. Is Sarah Schoengood or Joe Cohen going to come in with 400,000 raised and then suddenly like, oh damn, this is a person who can really keep up in this campaign? Or are they going to come in with 30,000 raised and it's like, oh well, so that was all for like what can they even do with that?
Yeah. So I think this race, this congressional race, maybe with the exception of the 8th district, more contingent upon what Judge Karashi, today the most powerful man in the state of New Jersey, but it is this race is hinging on what that ruling is. Carol Murphy, is a good campaigner. She comes from a good campaign family, and maybe has some access to.
Importantly, that campaign family is not Tammy Murphy's family. They are not related.
It's not. It really isn't. And but I think what you'll see here is just what I said. If the lines are abolished, she's going to get out of the race. Or if the lines are upheld, she's going to get out of the race. If the lines are abolished, we're going to have a very quick reset button on a short race for the Democratic nomination.
That's exactly what's on her mind. I spoke to her at the Mercer convention, and 2 things came up. One was that she was very closely watching the judge's deliberations and what he might do. And the other one, I complimented on her logo, which was a bear.
Yeah.
And David, I guess you probably know what I didn't know, which is that you're responsible for that. You wrote a story and you said, don't poke the bear. She liked it and she appropriated it for herself.
You know what it was? I wrote my story off a Burlington County Times editorial. For those that have been around New Jersey politics for less than 2 years, Burlington County Times used to be a newspaper. Now we've set sugar for
high school sports scores.
It is gone, and they don't have any reporters left. And by the way, as of today, no longer an affiliation with the Associated Press. So I don't know what's going to be in this newspaper tomorrow. But maybe they'll put the comics on the front page and the TV guide. I don't know. But they wrote an editorial saying, paying a compliment toward Carol Murphy. About sort of being a mama bear for her constituents. And I sort of took that and ran with it a little bit, and now it's her logo. So maybe when I'm gone, people will remember that. I don't know, but this race, this could be very quickly become the hottest one of the hot primaries in the state. Or it can go away. Or
it can be the at last the retribution for Herb Conaway, who lost a congressional race in the landslide in 2004.
Yeah,
in the same district, but in like several versions earlier when it was much more Republican. And now, that maybe seemed like the end of the road for a potential Congressman Herb Conaway back in 2004, but now suddenly this brand new opportunity has arisen.
Yeah, and I mean, Joey, you covered Joe Cohen's entry into the race, and you covered Sarah Schoengood's announcement. I don't see I don't see very much from them.
I mean, I think it'll depend a lot on the fundraising quarter. I think it'll depend a lot on the outcome of the county line. And one thing that I've been thinking about both of them and a couple of other candidates this year is, I mean, obviously Andy Kim came into the race in 2018 with an impressive resume as, you know, a national security advisor in the Obama administration stuff. But as we were talking about before with the tracker in the parking lot, he wasn't necessarily an immediately compelling candidate or someone who knew what he was doing. I think that had there been someone else, had let's say Herb Conaway in 2018 decided I'm going to run for this congressional seat, he probably would have gotten the lines that year. And Andy Kim would have been like, oh, well, I guess I tried that. And then he'd have gone and done something else. And none of us would really know his name. A lot of politics is timing, as we were saying before. And for these candidates who don't come from typical political backgrounds or don't have, you know, that experience in politics, sometimes the most important thing is simply being given the opportunity to try it out. And that just depends on whether anyone else wants that opportunity. So I think that, you know, if you were looking at a circumstance where this was, say, a tough Republican-held seat and the only person stepping up to try to flip it was Sarah Schoengood, then you'd be talking about this race very differently. But because it's a Democratic-leaning seat and because you've got these more established politicians in the race, unless she articulates a really clear reason via fundraising or via messaging or whatever else it may be, why these people that the local power brokers and voters know better shouldn't be the ones to win, then that's just a much more difficult case for her to make. And I think when we talk about the 7th district, that'll come up there too.
One of the, I think, out of fairness to Joe Cohn and Sarah Schoengood, I should just point out some recent history, which is not just Andy Kim, but Mikey Sherrill, Josh Gottheimer, Tom Malinowski. Nobody ever heard of them.
Yeah.
And they emerged on the scene, and you looked at their first fundraising quarter. I mean, Mikey Sherrill ended 2017 with $1.2 million. And that sent the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, Rodney Frelinghuysen, running for the hills. I mean, he bailed so quickly. At Far Hills, he was just out of this because that money spooked him out. And you hear about fundraising success, you hear that people are raising money, but you don't really know it until you see it on a report. I think we'll be able to make a determination on any viability if the lines are abolished. If the lines are abolished, we'll be able to make a determination on Joe Cohn and Sarah Schoengood on April 15th when we see their first quarter fundraising numbers. And if all of a sudden Sarah Schoengood, files the report and it's holy crap, she's raised $500,000, then we're all going to take another look. But if her numbers are in the tens of thousands, then there's no path. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, I think so.
I do. I mean, she's got a good team, but they're going to cost money. And
Joe Cohn has a solid team too. These are people who these are not the types of people who just put their names on ballots because they feel like it. These are people who want to be in Congress and actually had a pretty good idea about how to get there, but they this might not be the moment for them.
And Sarah
Schoengood in like her early 30s, so she's got a lot more opportunities if she wants them. But
and I haven't really looked at her financial disclosure. I don't know personal wealth or anything like that. I know with Joe Cohn, he's got Henry DeConnick and he's got Matt Creighton, and they've had some extraordinary successes in some races that maybe they shouldn't have won. So they're talented. If the money is there, it's going to be a different race. But again, stage one, step one is what Judge Quarashi says, and step two is how they've done it. Yeah. And then that's it. And Joey, the Republican side, and this is a Democratic district.
Yeah, I mean, so this is a district that was held by a Republican until Kim flipped it. But then in the 2022 redistricting process, all of Ocean County got taken out. What got put in was like Hamilton, Lawrence, parts of Monmouth that are red, but not that red. There's not a lot of upside for Republicans here. I mean, Republicans kind of thought that even with the new lines, they might be able to make something happen in 2022, and they lost by 12 points.
So that I'm looking at your list. The hat lady didn't file. Shirley Maya.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah, Shirley Maya Cusick. It looks like she was an odd candidate from the beginning. She was running for Senate. She self-funded a lot. She burned through all of her money.
$200,000 of her own money.
Yeah, she put her own money in, and then she burned through all of it immediately. And then she flipped a house where in a district that she didn't live in.
Moved from Hunterdon County to Burlington County to try and run for an open seat. Yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like, I mean, yeah. Assuming that you're right that these lists of candidates are in fact final, and we're not going to see any late additions, then yeah, I guess she's out. And the person who is very likely to be the Republican nominee here is a physician. This actually could end up being a physician on physician race because Herb Conaway is also a doctor, named Rajesh Mohan. Does not seem like a bad candidate by any stretch, but also does not seem like a candidate who is lighting Republicans' world on fire. He has two opponents in Michael Facone. I don't know how to pronounce the last name. I apologize if you're watching. And Greg Sobocinski. This is a race that, again, this is a district the Republicans have wanted to target for a while. They wanted to target even after it was redrawn. But this is not necessarily a field that's going to have the NRCC come running in and say, boy, I can't wait to spend $1 million here.
Greg is a very conservative, pro-life candidate who had worked with other pro-life candidates in the state and was trying to make something happen. I think saw the open seat and thought, okay, here's an opportunity. But it's an open seat in a Democratic district. So
yeah. And didn't do badly at the Monmouth Convention, but this just isn't there. And I look at, Michael Francis, it's either Facone, I don't know, but number one ballot slogan, "We like Mike" for U.S. Congress. And I'm sorry, I it's not my place to mock something, except that I will. That's like, what kind of messaging is that? What kind of what does that send either of you a signal that he's to be taken seriously in a primary when his ballot slogan is "We like Mike"? I mean,
with an exclamation point.
Not Eisenhower. Yeah. He's not Eisenhower, and it's not 1952 anymore. And I don't know where I don't.
All of the silent generation voters who just yearn for the good old days in this district are going to say, "Boy, this is the man for me." Yeah,
I mean, at best you're going to have former Senator Sam Thompson saying, "Yeah, I remember that was a good slogan," but other than that,
I lived in this district.
Nobody's going to remember it. I know. So the other thing is that Facone has 220 signatures.
There you go. That magic number.
And it's if you are Greg Sobocinski or any of them, you're going to say, I don't want more challengers to the other. I don't want another off the line candidate. I want to be the off the line candidate. You're going to go challenge it because it doesn't cost you anything, and they've got to knock 21 signatures off. And I would this might be an unfair characterization, but I don't have a lot of confidence that a guy who says a good slogan would be "We like Mike" to have also be sophisticated enough to get his petitions correctly. Certainly didn't get enough signatures to immunize himself from a challenge. So maybe this is the last time. Maybe we don't ever have to know how the name's pronounced.
So I think that that as it stands right now, there's not a ton of reason to believe that anybody other than Rajesh Mohan will be the Republican nominee here. And as it stands right now, there's not a ton of reason to believe that this will be a super competitive district in the general election, especially if the Senate ticket is headed by Andy Kim, who the district loves. The Cook Political Report recently moved this district. They had moved it to likely when Kim announced that he was running for Senate, just sort of out of an abundance of caution. They shifted it back to safe recently.
Okay.
Which sort of is an indication that, this is a district that had certain things gone certain ways, there could be something. Those things have not really gone those certain ways, so we can probably move on.
Okay.
So let's move on. There's a couple of districts in a row now that I think we don't have to spend all that much time talking about. You've got District 4, where Chris Smith is running for, David, help me out, 22nd term?
He's the 23rd term.
23rd, okay.
Yeah, he's finishing his 22nd.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
And still younger than a lot of members of the delegation.
Yeah. He's 17 years younger than Bill Pascrell, 16 years? He's got another like 8 or 9 terms in him before he gets to that age.
About that, yes.
I mean, so this is someone who, has not always been on the friendliest terms with the pro-Trump wing of the party. He's conservative on some issues like abortion, but he's not conservative on all it. He's not universally a right-winger. Did you guys expect at any point for there to be a serious primary challenge this year? Because there isn't. That spoiler alert, there's not.
Yeah. We didn't. Go ahead, Micah.
No, I could have seen a situation where Crispy came back again, or someone who's affiliated with Crispy came back again, because this is a wing of the party that's just not happy with mainstream incumbents, and they're never going to be happy with them. So I definitely could have seen a situation where somebody challenged him again from that wing. I mean, it's the first Congress.
Mike Crispy, for those who don't remember the 2022 primary, ran in 2022 against Chris Smith, got something like 37% of the vote. Which is a pretty respectable showing, honestly, but it was not all that close to winning. And he didn't really get the kind of he didn't get a Trump endorsement. He didn't get any of the kind of stuff that he was really hoping for in that regard.
And by the way, that says a lot about Chris Smith's own political skills, that he was able to stave off a Trump endorsement where other Republicans like Smith had incurred the wrath of Trump. Smith, I certainly not on policy, but on personality, I see some similarities between Smith and Andy Kim, that they both got there when nobody knew who they were, and sort of unexpected winners, and have shown some incredible political skill. Look, we know there was going to be no primary when nobody challenged Smith at the Monmouth and Ocean conventions. And Crispy, I think, has other focuses. I noticed today he's the one who delivered Donald Trump's petitions to the State House. Like a lot of people, if Donald Trump is elected president, you're going to see Mike Crispy in that administration, and he'll get a trajectory. For a guy who lost the primary for Morris County freeholder when it was still a freeholder, and then lost the race for Congress. That's a pretty good plan on his part, if he feels he can get that and get sort of go into that direction. David Schmidt, 227 signatures. I'd say he'd be off the ballot, except that Smith just doesn't do that. He just does, give him an opponent and he'll beat the opponent. He's not a challenge his petition kind of guy. But, this race, Smith's going to be the nominee. He's got a Matt Jenkins is running unopposed. So the other candidate in that race didn't file, and Trump's going to win this district, and Smith's going to win re-election.
Yeah, and I think that's all she wrote on District 4.
Yeah.
District 5, I think District 5 is another place where it is notable in and of itself that the incumbent Congressman Josh Gottheimer, no primary challenger for the second.
He gets to. Thank goodness he doesn't have to draw down his treasury. Spend it on
exactly.
a primary.
I mean, I cannot imagine what Josh Gottheimer would do if his war chest went from $17 million to $16.5 million. So yeah, I mean, Gottheimer is unopposed in his own primary. You've got a sort of interesting.
By the way, Joey, what you just did here inadvertently is Gottheimer is now going to take this clip and he's going to run money off of it. Big name journalist says that Gottheimer needs more, or he may be in trouble. He's going to take it out of context. You're now going to raise him $350,000 in the next 10
Do you want me to say it even more explicitly? Josh Gottheimer needs money. He doesn't have enough. 17 million isn't enough. Give now. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a question since we're at it, right? People are speculating about what he can do with that money if he runs for governor. Is there any way to non-federalize that? There's not really, is there? Can he take it on the soft side? He can't really, right? It's stuck with that.
He can take $16 million and put it on New York TV
and say Josh Gottheimer is standing up for a woman's right to choose in Congress, and will always
there you go.
For
whatever value that has. Yeah.
Unlike MAGA Mary Ginchard, throw in a little thing about his congressional race at the end, but it's mostly just like Josh Gottheimer. What a dude.
Yeah. So yeah, he could conceivably spend, go all in to build his name ID and hope the Democratic primary voters remember that. And maybe with that kind of money, he's got a pole in the field after, or not him, but say Patrick Murray's in the field on a governor's race after the election, and Gottheimer's name ID is sky high. And by the way, Steve Fulop is he's going to have the max, and his super PAC is doing really well, and he's by no means a poor candidate. And Mikey Sherrill may be doing the same thing. She may be spending millions of dollars in a race where she doesn't have to. So I don't know. But so Joe, there's two Republicans, right?
Yeah. So you've got Mary Jo Ginchard, who former Tuxedo Park, New York mayor, who has shifted into Bergen County politics and has sort of steadily moved up the ranks, where she was a failed county commissioner primary candidate in 2022, and then the nominee for county commissioner in 2023, and now the nominee for Congress. So if we interpret it as a pure slope, then she'll be president in about 6 years. So she is the Bergen County choice. And then you've got Paramus school board member George Song, who, despite losing the Bergen County endorsement, does have the endorsement in Passaic County, and filed, plenty of signatures. He's not going to get kicked off the ballot. So this will be a real primary. Anytime that you have multiple county parties disagreeing, it's sort of inherently a real primary, although Passaic is a much smaller portion of this district. In 2022,
no line in Sussex, but
line in Sussex, yeah.
Right. This is for Ginchard, and look, you look at. I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking it's a perfect illustration of maybe the ridiculousness of these slogans. Ginchard is on the line in Bergen, where their organization slogan for decades has been "Republicans for Responsible Government," and George Song's slogan is "Republicans for the People's Government." Punctuate, I think you got the punctuation right.
He did. Unlike several other candidates who filed this year, it actually pained me when I wrote them out in the spreadsheet to put incorrect grammar down. Like, oh.
Yeah. I mean, to make grammatical errors on a this may be a project for my friend Pat Siebold, Essex County Commissioner, a retired English teacher who doesn't hesitate to take a red marker and mark everything up. I think Commissioner Siebold should go through all the slogans and maybe find all the grammatical errors, and that might be interesting. I don't know. I don't know how much money they're going to have. I don't know, whether this is a real primary or not. It is not necessarily at all similar to Nick DiGregorio and Frank Pallotta from 2022. This is a Democratic district. I figured out, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I looked at the number of votes that Ginchard got at the Bergen County Convention, and I said, if each of these people maxed out to her at $5,600 each, it would reduce Gottheimer's cash edge to about $15.9 million.
There you go. And that assumes he doesn't raise another dollar from that point on.
Exactly. So, again, this is a primary, and I don't know, this district is not in play in the general, and I think
I think that Josh Gottheimer probably wants it to be Ginchard as the nominee rather than Song. I mean, Song is, Asian American local elected official, striking a bit more of a moderate tone. I think that would certainly that would probably be worth a couple of percentage points. But if the difference is between Gottheimer winning by 13 percentage points versus 16, it's not that determined. It's probably not going to affect the final outcome that much. This is, if Josh Gottheimer lost, it would be a really, really surprising result.
Yeah. Go ahead, Micah.
Go ahead. I was going to say maybe he and Mikey Sherrill will have an unofficial contest to see who has the bigger margin going into next year.
Yeah. It's not going to be unofficial at all.
Well, Cheryl will have an advantage of that because her district is already 7 points bluer.
Right.
So I think it's going to have to be who overperforms Biden more to be a fair playing field.
So here's what I'm going to look at, and it is obscure and premature. I'm going to look at Song's performance as a candidate, how good a campaigner he is, how much money he raises, maybe how close he comes, and wonder if in the right scenario, if Joe Biden is the president again, is he a guy that Republicans will recruit to run for the state assembly in the 38th? And maybe that's what I'm going to look at. I'm not looking at whether he's going to be a congressman.
Yeah, I mean that's reasonable. District 6, I think there's maybe less to talk about here than almost any other district. There actually is a primary on both sides. Frank Pallone faces a challenger in John Su, who is going to bracket with Larry Ham, I believe. He's like a progressive climate activist. Who, when David called him to ask what his campaign was about, he said, "Call me later, and I'll tell you." So, I mean, that's sort of not someone who is super prepared for the reality of a full on campaign. Scott Fegler, who is the Republican Party choice, is going up against Greg Mealy, who every year finds a new thing to run for. So this is his thing this year. I hope he has fun. I mean, this is a district the Republicans kind of thought they might be able to put in play in 2022. They had actually a pretty strong candidate, Monmouth County Commissioner Sue Kiley, and she didn't get close. She lost, I forget by exactly how much, but it's something like 17 percentage points. It was not a showing that would make Republicans look at this district and say, "Oh boy, we're really growing there." So, I mean, this is Pallone and Fegler will very likely win their primaries, and
You're not beating Frank Pallone. So
no, you're not. But the only thing I will say, I agree with that 100%, obviously. But the only thing I will say is candidates maybe ought to be looking at the year that they run in, the presidential year versus the congressional year, right? I mean, Sue Kiley might have done better with the turnout that you're going to see in Monmouth County this year as opposed to 2 years ago. Ultimately, she wouldn't win against Pallone either way, but this might have been a better year for her to run in.
I think my prior with this in general is that if you're running in a district that is favorable to the other party, it's better to run in a midterm just because the baseline is a lot more fluctual. It can fluctuate a lot more. In a presidential year, you probably know that the district is going to vote for the other party's president, and then you have to overcome that. Whereas in a midterm, it's all a little bit up in the air, and you can kind of make your own luck. That's my prior on that. I don't know.
Joey, can I make a suggestion?
Please do.
I think we're going to have the most to say about the 7th because that is the race to watch for the general election and not much for the primary. Can we do that last?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, good.
Which gives us the race that I think might have the most interesting primary, which is District 8. You have Robert, what's his middle name?
Jacobson.
So it's Robert J. Menendez.
And
his dad has no middle name, right? It's just Robert Menendez. Is that,
yes.
Am I remember that correctly?
Yes, and to all the reporters who consistently
is not goddamn Junior, which I know very well because I am the billionth Joseph Fox in my family, but I am not of the 7th or whatever because I have a different. My mom gave me her last name as one of my middle names, so it is different. Rob J. Menendez is not Rob Menendez Jr. Okay, thank you, David. We really tag teamed that pretty well. The man who is known as Robert J. Menendez, who is the son of indicted Senator Bob Menendez and is also a congressman in Hudson County, is going up against Hoboken Mayor Ravi Bala and Kyle Jacey, who is the son of Assemblywoman Mila Jacey. I think that is maybe...
Which means nothing in that district.
That is the main time that we should mention Kyle Jacey because he's not really playing too much of a role in this race. This is really a Ravi versus Rob beatdown. What are you guys looking for in this campaign? Because I mean, the campaign hasn't fully started, right? This was never a question of who was going to get the county line. Once the Hudson Democrats said we're fine with Rob Menendez, even with the stuff against his dad, that kind of ended that part of the story. And so now it's for months it's been a clear campaign of who will actually win with the voters.
Yeah, and the next part of the story that dropped out was the potential for Ravi Bala to run with Andy Kim, right? And so now that's not going to happen either. Bala is clearly on his own, right? With whatever other candidates he can assemble around his line. But the real exciting, tantalizing possibility was that they would be running together, and that would attract some real rival attention to the line. That's not going to materialize for him now.
Right.
And that may, so now you've got Andy Kim running with Rob Menendez. Kim last night was not yet ready to endorse Menendez. I don't know that he's going to endorse Bala either. Some people have suggested to me since yesterday that perhaps of the congressional candidates, or down ballot candidates, the most screwed by Tammy Murphy's getting out of the race is Ravi Bala.
Yeah.
Because of this new, Kim on the Hudson line. Menendez, and by the way, I'm going to say this, I don't know if it means anything or not. 2 years ago, he was on the ballot as Robert J. Menendez, and now he's Rob Menendez. Do I read anything into that? Or
a little bit.
Yeah. What do I read into? Because I don't know what I read into that, but
I mean, Rob is different than Bob, and Robert is not different than Robert.
And right? I mean, and when I've asked him about, I had a whole interview with him a month and a half ago or something like that. And I asked him about, these charges against his dad and how he'd respond. And, he repeated partially the line that he'd given right when the charges were released, which is, innocent until proven guilty. I have faith in my father. But also, I mean, the line that he is just going to have to repeat over and over again in this campaign is, I am a different man. I am fighting for the 8th district. I am doing my own thing. Fundamentally, whatever you may think about my dad, whatever you may think about the charges against him, this is the work that I'm doing, and this is why you should support me. The question is whether, and he's doing things like putting his name on the ballot as Rob Menendez that will probably help with that. The question is, Bob Menendez's trial is starting on May 6th. The primary is on June 4th. The line may be gone by then. Who knows? Can he survive that kind of flack? If there's no line, and if voters in the 8th district are getting on their nightly news the latest developments in Bob Menendez's corruption trial every single night, is that the kind of headwinds that he can go up against, especially against a candidate like Bala, who has more than $1 million and who will actually be able to run a really real campaign?
And the first thing, again, we're gonna look at fundraising in that district. The second thing is the answer is yes. National news is going to be covering this Menendez trial at least a little bit every day.
Yeah.
And one of the things, we saw in this Senate race is, this decimated legacy local media in New Jersey, the old print newspapers. That's not who created the problem for Tammy Murphy. Tracy Tully was significantly more important covering that race from the New York Times than any New Jersey newspaper reporter was. And I think you're going to see places like the New York Times interested in Rob. I mean, Tracy already wrote a story about the effect of Senator Menendez's indictment on 2 high-profile children, adult children. I shouldn't say children, but and I think you're going to see that kind of a heightened interest in Rob Menendez.
Especially now the Senate campaign has, that actually could be the double-edged sword for Rob Menendez. If the Senate campaign is no longer attracting interest and people want a New Jersey politics story to follow, this is the natural one to flip to instead. I mean, I was thinking when it was still going to be Kim versus Murphy, that I predicted very strongly that the New York Times editorial board, which doesn't really get that involved in Jersey, was going to say, we're going to come in this race and we're going to endorse Andy Kim. Now I guess they could still do that, but now are they going to maybe look instead to say we're going to endorse Ravi Bala? That could be, that's the kind of thing now. If that attention shifts to this race, that could probably be to the detriment of Rob Menendez.
It could. I don't know how the Sulzbergers make a case against nepotism, but the hypocrisy of the media has no bounds either. Look, Rob Menendez, I thought, had a bigger problem last year than he does this year.
I agree.
He has stopped the bleeding. He has put the party leadership behind him.
Pretty impressively, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's got Brian Stack. He's got, he
doesn't have Steve Phillip, but
he doesn't have Steve Phillip, but he's got Albio Sires and Chris Bolich and and Teresa Ruiz and in the North and East wards of Newark. He has stopped that from a organization standpoint. He has put some distance between his father and him. They Democrats did not hold the sins of the father or the alleged sins of the father against the son. I think it's going to be hard to look at any votes that Congressman Menendez has cast in the House and say they weren't the right votes for the 8th congressional district. He got there because of who his father was, and so the question is going to be whether he can hold the seat on his own merits. He's a talented guy. He works hard. He has made a good impression among House Democrats in Washington. The question is, will voters, number one, will they hold his father against him? And number two, and I think this may be more important, and really is a question for the two of you, because I don't know the answer to it. Will voters know that this is a different Menendez?
Right. We said when we started talking about the trouble that he might be in or that he might face, we said that he was not a guy who was in control of his own destiny. And so there's sort of at least three things that I think he has to be watching and holding his breath for. One is his father's trial. Two is the county line lawsuit, right? And three is hoping that he doesn't get sucked into this sort of looming party problem that's going on, this fight that's looming in Hudson County between Stack and Sacco, and hoping that he doesn't get sucked into that somehow, or that it's not to his detriment.
They're both for him. They're both for him.
Yes, they are. I know that. Yes.
Yeah. Brian Stack is going to,
as we've seen from Hudson County endorsements recently, they don't necessarily last.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So, no, I just mean I mean civil war is never good. That's that it
right.
can be to his detriment.
Right. And Bala, again, money and he's won some tough races in Hoboken.
Yeah.
And he, smart guy, and they're debating with the two of us on May 5th, Sunday, May 5th, the night before Senator Menendez's trial begins. Congressman Menendez will be in his first debate with Robbie Bala, and that's these two guys. They don't like each other, right? I mean, they don't like each other at all. And
Twitter wars.
Yeah, Menendez is already going negative on Bala, and this is going to be a nasty race. And nasty races don't backfire on you in Hudson County. So.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess we should mention there is a Republican running, Anthony Valdez. He will get about 25% of the vote in the general election.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that can be what we say about him.
Yeah, and by the way, perfect point to the time to interject this, which is we said the same thing about the guy who ran against Rob Menendez 2 years ago, and now he's a West New York town commissioner.
Yeah,
1 of 5, because it was a nonpartisan election. So
one state decided that they wanted to try to win the local small but not insignificant Republican vote. So there's always things that these campaigns can lead to. And also, I like to repeat this refrain every time we do one of these live streams. We will express our thanks in general to the candidates of the world who run these hopeless races, because without them, democracy would not be all that democratic. It is important to give voters a choice, even when the final outcome is probably predetermined. So thank you to the Anthony Valdez's of the world for giving the 1/4 of voters in the 8th district who are Republicans an option in this election. You will not be a congressman, but you will get this shout out from me. And that's just as good, in my opinion.
We say it all the time. Sacrificial lambs are the unsung heroes of a political party, because you need people like that to step up.
Yeah.
One last question on District 8. I mean, I guess it's possible. I guess, we have no data or anything, but Kyle Jacy, who's going nowhere, but could he be the spoiler? Could he peel off a couple votes from Ravi Bala, maybe in a close race and be the reason why Rob Menendez stays?
Yeah,
I mean, I guess it's always possible.
This is purely unfounded, but I wonder if he's going to get the highest percentage of the vote in Hoboken of anywhere, ironically, because just being the mayor of a town like Hoboken, it makes you, if you can win an election, then obviously, you're good enough to win a majority of voters there, but it also makes you some really devoted enemies. And Ravi Bala has some people in Hoboken, including several people on his own city council who hate the guy. And so some of those voters might say, well, I don't like the Menendezes, but boy, I hate Bala. So luckily there's a third guy on the ballot.
That's a good point. I mean, we talk about civil war being a bad thing, but you're right. In Hoboken, it's pretty fierce. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't think that this is not the kind of situation where Ravi Bala is probably going to come out of Hoboken with 80% of the vote, because he is just, he's a local politician who has made choices that have made him friends and enemies. And that, for better or for worse, will rebound on this congressional race.
Yep. Yeah. Good point.
Should we move on to District 9?
Yes.
So this was like the I don't know the metaphor that I'm quite searching for here. I was about to say dominoes falling, but that's not right. Bill Pascrell, 87-year-old congressman running for re-election. Andre Sayegh, Mayor of Patterson, said, I might challenge him, and then said, eh. And then Assemblywoman Siobhan DeSumter, the day that Sayegh said no, Assemblywoman Siobhan DeSumter said, oh, I might challenge him. And she actually filed for the screening committees. And then after she kind of made her stamp on the race, she was like, yeah, maybe not. And then very shortly after she got out, you have Prospect Park Mayor Mohammed Khairullah, who you may remember as the mayor who got disinvited from the White House, the Biden White House in a little bit of sort of a mini scandal over. I'm not even sure how that was fully resolved. It wasn't really fully resolved.
It was never resolved. No.
Yeah, he never got really the invitation back. It looked at various points like Pascrell was going to get a challenger. Then he wasn't, then he was, then he wasn't. And now we officially know he will. It's Mohammed Khairullah. He is running off the line on a very specifically Middle Eastern politics focused campaign. That seems, so his slogan is Yalla Change Aora, which I think is specifically trying to appeal to the district's both Muslim voters and Hispanic voters. This is an unusual.
That's got to be a record, Joey, for 3 languages in one line, one slogan.
Yeah, exactly, and only 3 words.
Right.
This, I think, will be an interesting campaign, but not necessarily because the final outcome is in doubt. Would you guys agree with that?
Yes, I do. And this is we'll see. The last time we saw Pascrell with a real primary challenge was 2012, when he and Congressman Steve Rothman were put into the same district. New Jersey lost the seat, lost the district, and those two had to run against each other in the primary. The conventional wisdom was that Pascrell was toast. There's more Bergen County in that district than Passaic, and he won rather substantially. The guy is like, he's 87, but he's like the Energizer Bunny, and he's not ready to leave yet. I think he's got a lot of money. I think he's going to take this seriously. You're talking about an Arab American community in parts of Patterson and other parts of Passaic County that feel disenfranchised by the Democratic Party. There's a lot of really important, serious things happening in the world, and Mayor Khairullah thinks that Congressman Pascrell is on the wrong side of that, and that's what our elections are for. We're going to see whether there's any kind of vulnerability for Pascrell in the Passaic portion of the district. I don't think there's any vulnerability in the Bergen portion at all. And again, we're going to see fairly soon whether the Arab American community is able to deliver huge dollars to the Karula campaign.
Yeah.
If they can't, I don't know what he's going to run the campaign on.
Yeah.
But this is fundraising, and this may very well be a look at whether Pascrell's age is a liability. And so far, I haven't heard much from Mayor Karula since he got in the race,
No.
and I'm curious whether he is going to make age an issue. At a time where we've all seen, the Biden numbers on his age, the Trump numbers on their age, and this would have been a Shavonda Sumter type of campaign where she would have said it's time for the Ninth District's next great congressman and paid tribute to him, but made age an issue. I don't know if it's going to be an issue this time. It's going to be an issue at some point for him.
Yeah.
And we'll see where that goes.
I think what both of you said is correct, that there's a community who feels not heard, right? The Muslim community feels not heard. And a protest, another candidate did not materialize. And I think that the mayor felt and his community felt like it was important that Pascrell not get a bye, that he get challenged. And I think it was important that they register that protest vote. They wanted to do that. I think the only question is how substantial it's going to be. And I won't make a comparison to the Orthodox community in Lakewood, but like the assembly election last year, we now get to see how much a community can be mobilized and whether a community can be mobilized. And they haven't really flexed their muscle before. So do they choose to flex their muscle? And can they flex? Can they mobilize voters? I guess is the question that could make this an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'll make two predictions for this. One prediction is that I think that Karula is going to get really, really strong numbers in the district's heavily Muslim and heavily Palestinian and Arab American communities. I think that he'll win Prospect Park by a lot. This is just my prediction. He'll win Prospect Park by a lot. I think he'll win the Palestinian neighborhoods of Patterson by a lot. And I don't think that he will have all that much of a dent elsewhere, because I'm not sure if there are enough voters who are going to care about the issues that I think he's going to push most heavily. And who are going to be willing to drop the party line, if it still exists, drop the congressman who they've been voting for years or decades. And so I think that you might see it where it's a really polarized map, where you look at like a precinct map, it's a voting district map in New Jersey, and you can see like this ruby, whatever color I decide to use on this map, ruby red section that's all Karula in one localized part of Patterson or Passaic County, and then just doesn't register all that much elsewhere. I mean, I think you see campaigns like that sometimes. You saw it with Avi Schnall in the Lakewood district, where his appeal was entirely limited pretty much to Lakewood. And it's just the difference there was that the way that seat was drawn and how big Lakewood is, that actually was enough. That was plenty. In this district, even in a legislative district, the Arab American community of Passaic County isn't really enough to have that kind of muscle just to say, we want someone in there, we're going to get it. And especially not in a congressional district.
And I don't mean this to be insightful, I shouldn't say insightful, because I don't mean to incite in any way by saying this, but I'm also curious to see if significant Orthodox Jewish communities in Passaic and Englewood come out and in larger numbers than usual in defense of Congressman Pascrell. And so it's not just going to be a test of the Arab American communities in the 9th District. It's going to be a test of the Orthodox Jewish communities in the 9th District also.
Yeah.
Right.
And even though, Joey, you're absolutely right when you say the congressional district is much more dispersed and harder to have that kind of an impact, for sure, no question. What brings it back down to earth is the primary level turnout, right?
Right. I mean, yeah. And so you could end up having it where if the Arab American community is mobilized to a much greater extent than anywhere else, then you could start seeing where they're getting like, I'm not even sure what the numbers would be, but something like 25 to 30% of the vote district wide. And then, Pascrell and other Democrats might want to wake up and be like, oh, wow, this is pretty significant. This is like a real contingent of voters who are pushing for this.
By the way, I just committed a incredible gaffe. And that is that Englewood was redistricted into Josh Gottheimer's district 2 years ago.
Incredible gaffe. You will
and
never
it is,
recover.
and I'm
I'm
mortified.
firing you and replacing you as editor of New Jersey Globe.
Yeah.
You can
Someday,
work for me now.
Joey, we'll start you out as the Sunday editor, since Sunday seems to be in the last couple of weeks such a
The day that I'm working the most.
Yeah, but it stands for the city of Passaic, and we'll see where that goes. And we've got a primer in the Republican side, and I'd like to start out by saying, I dismissed Billy Prempa in entirety the last time, and he turned out to be an extraordinarily better candidate, stronger candidate than I imagined, and I didn't give him the coverage that he should have gotten based upon the final outcome of the race. So I'm not going to make that mistake again. He's got 3 lines against Hector Castillo, who runs a lot for everything, and an accomplished man. I mean, he's an ophthalmologist, practices in Patterson, lives on and off between Patterson and Franklin Lakes, but Prempa has really built a base among Republicans. The convention in Bergen wasn't even close. He's got the lines in Hudson and Passaic. He is, for Republicans, a really aggressive candidate in a place where, the circumstances of his residency have been, living in a Democratic district is probably what's keeping him out of his office. But this guy works hard, and he's had some success. He had success in 2022 raising money. He's going to win the nomination, and I think this is an interesting race, tougher in a presidential year, and I'm probably talking too much about the 9th, but you look at these numbers. Pascrell was took some hits for his party in congressional redistricting. Everything that everybody wanted to get rid of to strengthen Mikey Sherrill, to strengthen Josh Gottheimer.
We'll throw it in Pascrell district.
To make the 7th district, where Malinowski was up for re-election, more competitive. Yeah. Somehow it all came in, and the effect of that is that the 9th became a little bit better for Republicans. Prempa, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but Prempa wrestled Pascrell in the Bergen portion of the district in 22 to sort of a draw.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to happen. I can see a scenario by which Prempa runs for a 4th time. If Joe Biden is reelected president and 89-year-old Bill Pascrell is running again in Joe Biden's midterm year in that district, that could be one to watch. And Prempa does not, he's an Air Force veteran that is not afraid of a fight. So, I'm going to watch him much more closely this time than I did last time or the time before that.
Yeah. One other thing that I'll say about, if Pascrell runs again, then that opens up a whole other set of questions. If Pascrell does not, assuming he wins re-election this year and then does not seek re-election in 2026, one thing that I think you kind of saw a little bit with this year was a few different people sort of making their mark in the sand and being like, when this seat comes open, I'm interested. You saw Sayegh do that. You saw Siobhan DeSumpter do that. You've got other candidates who might be interested in too, like
Benji Wimberly might.
Benji Wimberly did not do that.
Yeah,
that's
very much a candidate for that seat if it's an open seat. And
right.
And now I'll come back to Englewood for a second. Don't be surprised to see the mayor of Englewood, Michael Wilds, if that seat opened up. He's got he's a
seat that doesn't include Englewood, to be clear.
I'm sorry?
You're saying that he would run for a seat that does not include Englewood?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he would. I think he's got a federal account that he keeps healthy, and we're jumping way too far ahead, but I'll say it anyway because that's what we do on these conversations. One of the things Passaic County Democrats need to watch out for is you get more, you get more than one Democrat out of the Passaic portion of the district. And you could be looking at Congressman Clinton Calabrese or Congresswoman Tracy Zor, who lives in Franklin Lakes. And Bergen could take this seat if Passaic doesn't, in an open seat year, or if there's a real challenge to Pascrell in 26 in a primary. Bergen can sort of come in and steal a seat if Passaic doesn't have its act together.
Well, and we've talked about in our shows before how Passaic has at least an urban turnout problem, and it's been really the last several cycles that we've seen that, and the turnout in Passaic is increasingly suburban, and so you could see how a suburban Bergen candidate would cross the county lines and make an appeal to those places.
Right, especially if there's no line.
Right.
And
Right.
there are those, I'm going out of order here, but those I talk to who nobody really knows what's going to happen, but those I talk to whose opinions I respect, they are saying to me, well, there might still be a line in 2024, but more optimistic. Yeah, that line may be diminished going forward.
Yeah.
At the very least, there may be a legislative change that requires a county like Passaic to no longer pick somebody in a very small, not open to the public screening committee, but force some type of a convention.
Yeah.
Where as Andy Kim showed, a person with different types of support and appeals could actually win party conventions.
Yeah.
Which sounds great. I mean, having that kind of reform sounds great, but I don't know that you get past the judge's muster on whether or not the ballot itself is a loaded instrument at this point, right? I mean, that's really the question.
The legal case actually doesn't have a ton to do with how the line is awarded. I mean, it sort of references that as kind of like a corollary of like, not only does this have these ridiculous effects, but also it is awarded in this ridiculous way. But that's not really the core of the legal argument.
Right. But take this tangent a little bit further. It might not be the core of the legal argument, but it's very much a factor in the public case against the line that
what legislators might be pressured to do.
Yeah.
All right. My thinking is that I can just rush through districts 10, 11, and 12 with just basically giving an overview, and you guys can jump in if you want, but I don't think there's a ton to say in any of these.
Other than there's a cousin of Bucco running. Yeah.
Is that in fact Tony Bucco's real cousin?
Sean Cavanaugh told me that yes, it is. He met him at the Union Convention.
Okay. So so District 10, Newark-based district, most Democratic district in the state, one of the most Democratic districts in the country. Donald Payne Jr., with his terribly small 1,223 signatures. I don't know what he's doing. He could do so much better. Is going up against apparently State Senate Minority Leader Tony Bucco's cousin, Carmen Bucco. This race, they're already the presumptive nominees, and then the race will happen, and then Donald Payne will win by 65 points, and then we can move on. District 11, this is Mikey Sherrill. So as David was mentioning before, there's the contest of who can do better, Sherrill or Gottheimer. Sherrill has 3 Republican opponents. You've got Joseph Belnome, or is it Belnomi? Belnomi, who was the nominee for state Senate in a safely Democratic district last year and is a building inspector in Belleville. He became their Republican organizational choice a little bit by default. There was going to be another candidate, Toby Anderson, but he dropped out right before the Morris County Convention. So Belnomi just he was the one who filed in time. He was the one who went to party leaders and said, hey, I'm interested. And they said, okay. And then 2 other people who kind of curiously did not do that, even though I feel like they might have been competitive had they done so. Rafat Barsoum, who has run for the 7th district a couple of times, and John Sowers, accountant from Rockaway. None of these people, from what I can tell, are the types of people who would attract much outside interest in the race. And even if there was the outside interest in the race, this isn't the kind of district that would really do much with it. I mean, it used to be competitive. It was redrawn to be more Democratic. Mikey Sherrill is a really strong incumbent. So,
Joey, can I just ask, no commentary, but can you read the slogans of the two off the line candidates?
yeah, sure. John Sowers is common man for common solutions.
Dun, dun, dun.
And Rafat Barsoum might have the best of anyone running this year. Time for change? You choose. So the voters of the 11th district will indeed choose whether it is time for change. They will probably choose that it is not time for change, because Rafat Barsoum typically gets about 8% of the vote in primaries. And then you've got District 12, which is Bonnie Watson-Coleman's district. She has a primary challenger, former Princeton School Board member Daniel Dart, who is a white man running against a black woman in a majority-minority district, running specifically to her right, saying that she's not moderate enough. I have never heard a less compelling Democratic primary argument than everything that I just said. He's also saying that it is time for a new
Former Republican.
Okay, even better. He's saying that it's time for a new voice and new blood. Bonnie Watson-Coleman is something like 75. Daniel Dart is something like 62 or 63.
8.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to dump on poor Daniel Dart too much, but just everything that I've read about this election tells me, oh wow, this is not someone who is going to be able to make much of a dent here. And then Darius Mayfield, who ran against Bonnie Watson-Coleman in 2022 and did pretty decently given the district, although he didn't come anywhere close to actually winning, is running again. He's got the party line. Thomas Jones Jr., who has the petition slogan that made me wince because of the grammar. Preserving Americans, no apostrophe or anything, preserving Americans' greatest generation. Good luck with that.
There you go. What percentage of the voters are from the greatest generation in New Jersey? It's got to be under 15%, right? 10% maybe under.
Isn't greatest generation now like that's before like 1930, right?
Well, that's true. We'd be lucky.
It's silent generation that's the one that we think of as pretty old people. Greatest generation is now my grandfather, who was
good
born in
point. So
1922 and is 101 years old. There's not too many people in that category left.
And just quickly, I mean, first of all, Darius Mayfield, hardworking, has not stopped campaigning since 22. Tom Jones in the race, dropped out of the race. Sent a letter to the Somerset Convention. He was withdrawing as a candidate, and all of a sudden he filed his petitions. Filed with 241. Chances are, just slightly under 100% that Darius Mayfield will challenge that. And they've got to find 42. It's a little bit harder than 21, but I don't know. This will be, guy's got name ID, right? Tom Jones. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. Mayfield's got the lines, if there's still lines. If not, Mayfield will outwork the other guy, and Bonnie Watson-Coleman is really strong in the general. So
this will be a district that'll be fascinating if there's ever, presumably at one point, Bonnie Watson-Coleman will retire. Not saying that's anytime soon, but it will happen eventually, just logically. And this is a district, I mean, it's just such a fascinating district. It stretches from Trenton up through the more diverse parts of Somerset County, over into parts of Middlesex County, like some of the Brunswicks, but importantly not New Brunswick, and then up to Plainfield. And you've got all of these different competing political interests. You've got significant portions of Asian American voters, white voters, black voters, Hispanic voters. You've just got you've got urban voters, you've got rural voters, you've got suburban voters, you've got every piece of New Jersey is somewhere in this district. And so when this district opens up, I think it could be like the most fascinating primary in the state, but that's definitely not this year. It'll be very boring this year.
Can I, one point that I'd like to make now that we're finished with the 12, before we go into the 7th, one name to me noticeably missing from filing day, unless it's for the West Amwell Township Committee or something, is I don't see Lisa McCormick anywhere. She didn't file for anything. She had announced for the Senate. She's never filed with the FEC. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times. She never files, but she's got, links for online fundraising. I don't know where this money is going to, but interesting here is last week, the guy that I call the the controversial political consultant, the gremlin of New Jersey politics, James Devine, who is, the controversial life partner of Lisa McCormick. He was indicted last week for submitting what an administrative law judge found to be petitions running for governor against Phil Murphy in the primary that were completely and totally forged and fake, and he's now facing a number of years in prison for
Weren't they in
submitting.
the same order as the voter list? Weren't they
They,
like?
they were.
Yeah.
It was just, it was ridiculous. I remember one of, as evidence of the fact that James Devine used mail merge, the alleged evidence, but pretty clear because I have those petitions. There was one signature where the voter that signed the petition, his name was first name, middle name, last name. I mean,
That's my son you're talking about.
Yeah,
Don't slander him.
Yeah, I mean, it's just,
it's a family name.
So the question is, did the indictment make Devine think, gee, I'm about to file more fraudulent petitions?
Our circulator was indisposed.
Another crime, and I think there's only one room, room for one person in New Jersey who just keeps committing alleged crimes and says I'm going to keep, I'm going to remain in office, but
he's giving advice to Andy Kim on how he ought to file.
He is, and I found that today there's a primary for mayor of Washington Township. There's an off the line candidate.
Which Washington Township?
In Washington Township in Gloucester County.
Gloucester, okay.
This is for the open, the mayor was elected county commissioner last year, and this off the line guy, his consultant is James Devine. You think maybe Steve Askew might be checking those petitions tonight? You think there's maybe a remote chance of that they're going to take that seriously? But at some point somebody's going to follow the money, and at some point somebody's going to wonder. She's got these links for online donations, and unless absolutely nobody is clicking on it, nobody's giving her $1, she hasn't filed, and at some point, that's got to catch up with her.
She's a write-in candidate, David.
Yeah. All right, Joey, go ahead. District 7.
So the big primary is Tom Kean Jr. versus Roger Bacon. Who will win? It's the most competitive thing in the state. He said, joking, obviously. Yeah. Roger Bacon likes to run for office. He ran for this district as a Democrat 2 years ago. He is a MAGA Democrat who I guess is now a MAGA Republican, which is less of an interesting thing to be. I mean, I guess it'll be an interesting barometer. If he's running on the ballot slogan. This is another funny one. MAGA Trumper, drain DC swamp now. If he gets like 15 to 20% of the vote, then you might think like, oh, Kean's maybe got a little bit of a problem on his right flank for people who have no idea who Roger Bacon is, but like the idea of MAGA Trump or drain DC swamp now. Otherwise, that's boring. The interesting part is the uncontested primary. As you were mentioning before, David, Sue Altman, anti-Lion Crusader, longtime thorn in the side of most powerful people in New Jersey, is now the organization and widely liked candidate for, widely liked among Democrats, for Congress in New Jersey's most competitive congressional district.
Yeah. I mean, look, one of the things you see here, and I'm going to say this about, Sue Altman and Tom Kean Jr. right now, into filing day have run, perfect campaigns. Kean has avoided a serious primary challenge from the right. I'm waiting to see, there's no way Harrison Neely is not going to challenge the use of Donald Trump's name in a slogan without his permission. There's no way. Neely is going to be, Neely's going to be on that. He's not going to be on that. He's already on that. He's already looked at it. He's already talked to his lawyers. They're going to go after that. I'm sure of that. But Kean has positioned himself well for a guy that that in a district that is a little bit more conservative than he is. He doesn't have any issue from the right. Roger Bacon this is his, I think it's his 10th campaign. And he's not going to go anywhere. And then the other thing is Sue Altman has run a flawless campaign so far. And the fact that she's unopposed is not because nobody else wanted it, but because
she beat them into submission.
She did. She beat she vanquished 3 men and knocked them out of the race. Nobody cleared the field for Sue Altman. No. Sue Altman cleared the field for herself. And she did it old school. She got in immediately after Tom Malinowski said he wasn't going to run again. And she went around and she met county committee and she met with local officials and she raised money. And I could tell you it is dangerous to call Sue Altman during call time. Because she is disciplined, and by the way, so is Tom Kean. I mean, they are disciplined candidates. Tom Kean stays on message better than anybody else in New Jersey politics, and Sue Altman works as hard as anybody. She's doing this full time. She is all in, and going into what is what will be one of the most closely watched congressional races in the country this year. One of these seats that control of the House, could be contingent upon. She is preserving this money. She learned how to be a candidate. She's never done this before. Sue Altman will never, regardless of whether she wins or she loses, she will never be the same again. She has seen how the sausage is made, and she has figured out how to do this. She has become a really strong candidate, and Kean has shown that too. He is also a strong candidate in that district, and he's beaten an incumbent once. He almost beat an incumbent another time. He is regimented in terms of raising his money. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes because Joey can't bait him standing outside the House chamber when
is a strong word for what I'm doing when I say, Congressman, comment on this.
Yeah. He doesn't take, he sticks to his message, and I'll give this to Tom Kean because he learned some politics from, a guy that I greatly admire, Bob Franks, who used to say, they can't write what I don't say. And Tom Kean has become, and I'm not saying this is a negative, Tom Kean has become a master of they can't write what I don't say. He's not giving people sound bites. He's not making unforced errors. This is going to be a phenomenal race to watch this fall. It's going to be great because you have 2 candidates who have figured out how to ramp up and run really good races.
Well, the Republicans are salivating. The Kean camp is salivating about running against Sue Altman's record as a progressive, right? And ideas that may be out of the mainstream, ideas that the Working Families Party's champion. They're looking forward to that. They've got a roadmap drawn to them. If they just follow Steve Askew's Twitter account, they'll see the whole record out there for them. But on the other hand, Sue Altman is chomping at the bit to run against the do-nothing Congress of the last 2 years, the House of the last 2 years. And so, they're going to be talking over each other for sure, but they both have a lot to talk about over the next 6 months.
I mean, one thing I think is interesting about Sue Altman's campaign is obviously she's not stopped being a progressive. She was endorsed by the Congressional Progressive Caucus when she still had a primary, and she remains very anti the line. When I went to the federal courthouse to watch the lawsuit against the line, who was there but Sue Altman? She wasn't a party in the case or anything, but she was there. She was there to watch it, but she still really cares about this. But her campaign has not been New Jersey's 7th congressional district needs a left-wing vision for America, right? Like she's cleverer than that. So there's absolutely no question that her record leaves a lot of things to get poked at by Republicans. And I'm positive that there will be Republican super PAC ads coming in talking about the Working Families Party and, defund the police and Israel and whatever else, and all kinds of things that those are real liabilities for her. But one thing that I thought was interesting was during the primary, when there was still a primary, when she was facing. So since we haven't said their names, the people the fellow Democrats that she vanquished at one point or another were Roselle Park Mayor Joe Signorello, Summit Councilman Greg Vartan, and then most prominently a former State Department official named Jason Blazakis. And in particular, it really looked for a while like there was going to be a showdown, a head-to-head showdown between Blazakis, who had a lot of sort of profile similarities to Malinowski and to Andy Kim, versus Altman. They're like, and a lot about that race, it's a more moderate former State Department official versus a more progressive, grassroots activist who doesn't have much experience in government. That's the kind of thing that you might see national Democrats be like, we got to there's a clear right answer and a clear wrong answer here. But they didn't really do that here. They didn't, this was not a district that they were, at no point did I get the sense in my talking with them or in just the way that they were behaving about this race, that they were particularly nervous about Sue Altman becoming the Democratic nominee. And I think that obviously she will still get attacked plenty by Republicans, but I thought that was an interesting indication of early on that, she's a real candidate and this is going to be a really fascinating race all the way to the end.
She's got to use the Andy Kim mold, which is not to take the cookie cutter approach, to the candidate-led approach rather than the House-driven approach or the campaign committee-driven approach.
Right.
So, yeah. Joey, how tell me about the effect of the presidential race on this race for Congress.
Like in November?
In November, yeah, the primary.
I mean, this is a district that is moving towards Democrats faster than almost any other in the country. It's the perfect combination of voters who just really don't like Donald Trump and really don't like the current vision for the Republican Party. So, I mean, this is places like Westfield that have famously become pretty blue suburbs. But it's also, I think, even more importantly, places like Mendham and Bernardsville, and these places that were sort of unthinkingly Republican almost for decades. And then either in 2016 or in 2020, one of the two Trump runs, they just said, that's it. We've reached our limit. We're out. Peace. So I think the first question is, how is the overall presidential race going? Is Biden winning re-election? Is Trump winning? If Biden is winning, is he winning by a lot, et cetera, et cetera? And obviously the better that Biden does, the more likely Sue Altman is to win. But the second question, I think, is regardless of what's happening nationally, how does a district that is as specific as the 7th District of New Jersey react to this presidential race? And does it zag where the rest of the nation is zigging? I think that there is definitely a possibility where Joe Biden wins by a fair bit nationwide and Tom Kean Jr. still wins, because there's a lot of ticket splitting like you saw in 2020. I think there's in this very district. I think there's also a possibility where Donald Trump wins the presidency, but this district, the trends just prove too much and the voters just don't trust Republicans of any stripe here. And Sue Altman wins under a Donald Trump presidency. So, I mean, I think that, saying too much more is starting to get too speculative because we're so many months out. But that's my initial read on this, is that this is a district that long-term is not good news for Republicans. But it's tough to say in the short term what this presidential year will look like and how bad of news it'll be for Tom Kean Jr. right now in this context.
Yeah. And many, many millions will be spent by outside groups in this district, and both sides are going to be, really well funded. So
I think of the options that you laid out, Joey, and this is a little bit crystal balling, which is not our job, but you can see that the kind of campaign that Trump is going to have to put on that may play nationally in places where he needs to win is going to turn off the kind of voters that we see in the 7th District.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But Kean has, also shown an ability he ran, way ahead of Trump in 2020 in that district. And, this is
ran less ahead of where you sort of would have expected him to be in 2022. Yeah. And so at what point, especially in places like Westfield, I think that the place where he fell the most from 2020 to 2022 might have been his hometown of Westfield.
Mhm.
Right.
or it's one of, or maybe it was something around there.
And then Westfield had, and we're getting too hyper local here, but Westfield and Summit had sort of a little bit of a local realignment where Republicans took over Summit, and now they picked up 4 council seats in Shelley Brindle's midterm election, and you look at these numbers, not as Democratic as it was 2 years ago, but we'll see. This is the race that we're going to spend practically all our time on.
This fall.
This fall.
You could see Kane, and this may sound atypical for him, but I don't think it is, because remember he talked about local schools a lot 2 years ago, and tried to mobilize local school people who were upset about local school board decisions and all that kind of stuff. You could see him potentially, given what you just said about those commuter towns, those train station towns, you could see him railing against the new COA law, the new affordable housing law.
Yeah, I mean, there's, and I can see, Kane is crossing his fingers, saying, "Please endorse Sue Alton and Tom Moran," because Moran's endorsement is good for a shift of 5 points to Kane. So, I don't know. This is where we're going to spend our time. This is it. So
but we're not going to spend any more of our time tonight, because we've reached the 2.5 hour mark, and I think
we have
plenty for both us and for our watchers.
That's true. Other than I'm just going to say it really quickly. I haven't seen all the local filings yet. I thought about just watching Joey's face, and if he said, "Okay, let's start on the local races."
Yeah, but I would know you were lying, because I was like, I know that you haven't gotten that from all those county clerks. They're not going to respond that fast.
I haven't yet, but
on this piece of paper, I have.
Yeah. Right now, we're going to be watching. We talked about earlier, Cumberland County Democrats are a mess. And there are 4 county commissioner candidates for 2 seats. That'll be one to watch. And Passaic County, Jerry Spezial, former sheriff, running, with tremendous name ID, good base, close to $500,000 in the bank left over from his unused 2010 race. He's running, against somebody who's not as well known in a Democratic primary. He is running 3 county commissioner candidates with him. I think as we get closer to the primary, that's going to be a race we're all going to be watching really carefully. Is Jerry Spezial on the precipice of competing for control of Passaic County Democrats with John Curry's organization? If the lines are thrown out, we're looking at a whole new ballgame in Passaic. And then just the last point that I wanted to make before Joey, the youngest of the 3 of us, falls asleep.
You always got to do that. I haven't been showing any signs of falling asleep.
You are younger than us, and that is a metric that is provable. That is not subjective. It's just the way it is. Mike and I.
What is subjective is that I'm falling asleep, which I'm not.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. The other thing I wanted to point out is, from what we have seen so far in the filings, is it is now clear, on the day after Tammy Murphy dropped out of the race, that Andy Kim was not planning to run his own line in all these other counties. We had all this talk about, will Kim run his own slate in these places where, in Essex for Hudson County surrogate, against Peg Schaefer's county commissioners in Somerset. And, there's no evidence that he was recruiting candidates. And it doesn't look like any of them filed. So
that wasn't really the way that he was playing this game. I mean, his lawsuit was partially like, he specifically said in the courtroom, that is unrealistic for me to do, and I don't really have any desire to do that.
Right. And so what filing day showed is that Andy Kim's that his testimony was truthful. He was aiming at the U.S. Senate and not forging alternate lines everywhere else. Now that helps, because in New Jersey, when you do a ballot draw, U.S. Senate comes first. You don't get ballot Siberia in a Senate race.
Right.
But
which has been almost completely lost in this litigation.
Yeah, and
both sides made that point very poorly at the court case. I was trying to follow along as both the pro-line side made that point, and then it was a mess. People are not.
but,
nuance.
but that may also be because Judge Karashi didn't give Raj Parikh an opportunity to do his close. He from what I read from Joey's coverage and others, he sort of abruptly said, "Okay, I'm done," and that was it. And and there were no closing statements. I think there's requests now to be able to go back to court and make those closing statements. But Raj Parikh, one of the very best election lawyers in the state, he was going to do the close for the people that wanted to defend the line. He didn't get a chance, and that, I think that point that Micah, that you mentioned about the draw, that almost certainly would have been in Parikh's closing.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all I have to say.
Okay, Micah, any closing thoughts?
I'm good if you're good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good. I think that this has been a primary season that is far more interesting than I think the ultimate primary ballots will necessarily reflect. There was a lot that happened that will exist in the New Jersey Globe archives that will not necessarily exist for voters and will not really exist in the minds of voters at all who haven't been closely paying attention to this race. I mean, you saw polling. Andy Kim, Tammy Murphy felt like the biggest race of all time. Polling showed that a huge percentage of voters either hadn't heard of them or hadn't made up their minds about how to feel about them. So a lot of this stuff will happen in the sort of ether that will never really reach a voter's ballot. But there is stuff that's still reaching it. There's the 3rd district primary. There's Rob Menendez versus Robbie Bala. There's going to be Tom Kaine versus Sue Altman, obviously. Lots of elections still to follow. Keep with us. We'll keep following them. But this is definitely this is a primary season for the ages in an unusual way, because the primary itself is not really what reflects it, but rather all of it led up to what the final results were.
Well, that's a good point, and this is a little bit of an academic point that I'll make, and I'm sorry to belabor it, but David and I have these discussions all the time about how history will reflect that the line with Andy Kim on it won this time, right? That it was a victory for the line, and you miss the entire backstory of what we've all just lived through. So it really is only this much of the story.
Yeah,
and the line will go down, and we'll see you again for a live stream in 2 weeks, talking for 3 hours about the end of the line, and that's a New Jersey Globe and Rider University promise.
Yeah, that's it. And look, Joe, I mean, Joey and I have talked about this since last week. I mean, you could almost sum up 2024 so far as Nadine Menendez wanted a new Mercedes, and now the line's gone, and we'll see where it goes, but.
Allegedly, we always got to add allegedly. We're journalists.
Allegedly, we have to add allegedly. I do want to make the shameless pitch for our next 2 events, which fortunately will be moderated by Laura Jones, who will keep not just the candidates to their time, but the 3 of us too. Laura is much better at that than I am, and
you'll notice how we do when she's not here.
Yeah. But Wednesday, April 3rd at 8 p.m. is the first Republican U.S. Senate debate with Curtis Bashaw and Christina Serrano Glasner, and not with Alex Zidane. So it'll be a 2-person debate. And then Sunday, May 5th, Rob Menendez and Ravi Bala. So we will be back, and I would imagine that if there's huge news from Judge Karashi, we may come back for a little while and talk about it, and maybe get some of the lawyers on too, and do like a real panel discussion about what this happens and where it goes from there. But look, until then, this is Joey Fox, Micah Rasmussen of the, I say it real fast, the director of the Rebovich Institute of New Jersey Politics at Rider University.
Oh, that's good.
We need to come up with some
I know. I always say, if you have to do something, make sure you keep the Rider. That's the main.
Yeah, we'll keep Rider. And Rider has just been on top of New Jersey politics, and been a great partner with our site.
It's been a great partnership, absolutely.
But most importantly, they are really in what these candidates are doing, what they stand for, and creating greater exposure for to the voters it seems to be a core mission. President of Ryder right down, and for that, New Jersey ought to be extraordinarily grateful. So thanks everybody, and we'll be stuck how much 2 hours and 38 minutes. So maybe Al Barless is still awake. I don't think so, but we didn't talk about the 40th, so I think we're good. Thanks everybody.
Good night.
Good night.